Welcome to the shadowy depths of the forest where darkness reigns and secrets lurk behind every twisted tree. I'm your guide into the unknown, ready to lead you through tales that will chill you to the bone. But before we venture deeper, tell me, what city are you watching from? Leave a comment below and let me know where the fear is spreading tonight. If you dare to join our community of brave souls, hit that subscribe button now. And don't forget to leave a like if you want more terrifying tales from the deep woods. Now let me take you to a place where the branches reach out like gnarled fingers and the wind whispers warnings through decaying leaves. Our story begins on a moonless night when a group of friends decided to test their courage by camping in the heart of these cursed woods. Little did they know, something ancient and hungry was waiting for them. The cool, damp air of the Sequoia National Forest filled my lungs as I crouched down to examine a patch of unusual moss. The gentle rustling of leaves and distant chirping of birds created a peaceful backdrop to my research. Little did I know that serenity was about to be shattered forever. As I reached out to collect a sample, a faint tremor rippled through the earth beneath my feet. I paused, frowning. "Earthquake?" I muttered to myself. But the vibration felt different, localized, almost rhythmic. I stood up slowly, my eyes scanning the forest floor. The tremor came again, stronger this time. My heart began to race as I realized the pulsing sensation was emanating from directly beneath me. "What the hell?" I whispered, taking a hesitant step backward. The ground seemed to shift under my weight, as if adjusting to my movement. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I tried to rationalize what I was experiencing. I fumbled for my satellite phone, needing to hear another human voice. As I dialed my research partner back at base camp, the pulsing intensified. The call connected just as I felt something slither across my boot. "Sarah? Sarah, can you hear me?" My voice cracked with barely contained panic. "Alex? Is everything okay? You sound... The ground, Sarah. It's moving, pulsing. I don't know how to describe it." I stumbled back as a root near my foot suddenly writhed and curled. "Alex, calm down. What do you mean it's pulsing? Are you sure it's not just... God damn it, Sarah? I know what I'm feeling," I snapped, fear making my tone harsh. "Something's wrong here. Very wrong." As if in response to my outburst, the pulsing beneath my feet surged. The entire forest floor seemed to ripple, leaves and debris dancing in a terrifying wave. I lost my balance, falling hard onto my back. The phone clattered away from my grasp. "Alex? Alex?" Sarah's tinny voice called out from the device, now just out of reach. I tried to crawl towards the phone, but the ground beneath me felt soft, yielding. My hands sank into the soil as if it were quicksand. Panic exploded in my chest as I realized I was being pulled downward. "Help!" I screamed, thrashing wildly. "Somebody help me!" The forest remained indifferent to my cries. The pulsing grew stronger, more insistent. It was no longer just beneath me. I could feel it in the air, in the trees, in my very bones. Each throb sent a wave of terror through my body. I managed to wrench one arm free, my fingers clawing desperately at the ground around me. Instead of solid earth, I felt something spongy and warm. It pulsed in time with the rest of the forest floor, and I recoiled in horror. "This can't be happening," I gasped, my mind reeling. "This isn't possible." But as I looked around, I saw the impossible becoming reality before my eyes. The trees seemed to sway without wind, their roots visibly shifting beneath the soil. Patches of moss and lichen pulsed with an otherworldly bioluminescence. The entire forest was coming alive in a way that defied everything I thought I knew about nature. In the distance, I heard Sarah's voice still calling out from the phone, but it was fading, drowned out by a new sound, a low, rhythmic thrumming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It resonated in my chest, matching the pulsing of the ground. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the nightmare around me. But even in darkness, I could feel it. The pulsing, the movement, the undeniable sense that I was no longer on top of the forest floor, but becoming a part of it. When I opened my eyes again, the world had changed. The trees loomed larger, their bark seeming to ripple and flow. The sky above had taken on a sickly, greenish tinge, and the ground was no longer solid. It undulated like the surface of a vast, breathing organism. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. As if in response, a tendril of fungus burst from the soil beside me. It quested through the air, seeming to sense my presence. I watched, paralyzed with fear, as it inched closer to my face. Just before it made contact, I heard a voice. Not Sarah's, not human at all. It resonated in my mind, ancient and alien. "We are the forest. We are alive. And you, little one, are now a part of us." The fungal tendril touched my cheek, and in that moment I felt the true enormity of what I had discovered. The pulsing ground was just the beginning. I had stumbled upon something vast, incomprehensible, and terrifyingly alive. As the forest floor continued to throb beneath me, I realized my life as I knew it was over. The real horror was just beginning. My hands trembled as I clawed at the pulsating earth, desperation fueling each frantic movement. The soil felt warm, almost feverish, as it slipped through my fingers. With each handful I excavated, the forest's rhythmic thrumming grew louder, more insistent. Come on," I muttered, my voice quavering. "There has to be an explanation for this." As I dug deeper, the earthy scent of decaying leaves gave way to something else, a musty, alien odor that made my nostrils flare. Sweat trickled down my brow, stinging my eyes, but I couldn't stop. I had to know what was causing this impossible phenomenon. Suddenly, my fingers brushed against something that wasn't soil or root. It was smooth, almost rubbery, and pulsed with an inner light. I recoiled instinctively, a strangled gasp escaping my lips. What the hell? Steeling myself, I reached out again, this time grasping the object firmly. As I pulled, a network of glowing tendrils emerged from the earth, interconnected and alive. They writhed in my grasp, seeming to react to my touch. This is impossible," I whispered, my scientific mind reeling. The fungal network stretched as far as I could see, disappearing into the shadows between trees and under rocks. Each tendril pulsed with an eerie bioluminescent glow, creating a web of light beneath the forest floor. I fumbled for my field journal, needing to document this discovery despite the terror clawing at my insides. As I scribbled furiously, my satellite phone crackled to life. "Alex? Alex, are you there?" Sarah's voice was thick with concern. I snatched up the phone. "Sarah, you're not going to believe this. I found something extraordinary." "What is it? Are you okay?" I laughed, the sound bordering on hysteria. "Okay? I don't know if I'll ever be okay again. It's a fungal network, Sarah, but like nothing we've ever seen before. It's massive, it's glowing, and I swear to God, it's alive." There was a long pause before Sarah responded, her voice cautious. "Alex, that's not possible. Maybe you should come back to base camp. We can send out a team." "No!" I shouted, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. "No, you don't understand. This isn't just a colony. It's one organism. One massive, interconnected being." As if to emphasize my point, the network pulsed brightly, sending a wave of light rippling through the forest. I watched, transfixed, as nearby plants seemed to sway in response. "It's communicating, Sarah. With the trees, the plants, and maybe even with me." "Alex, listen to yourself. You're not making sense. Whatever you think you've found." "I know what I've found," I snapped, frustration bubbling up. "This could rewrite everything we know about forest ecosystems, about consciousness itself." As the words left my mouth, I felt a change in the air. The pulsing of the fungal network intensified, and with it came a sensation of awareness. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, studied. "Sarah," I whispered, my excitement giving way to a creeping dread. "I don't think I'm alone anymore." "What do you mean, Alex? You're scaring me." I swallowed hard, my eyes darting around the dimly lit forest. This thing, this network, I think it knows I'm here. I think it's aware. A tendril of fungus suddenly shot out of the ground near my feet, causing me to stumble backward with a yelp. It quested through the air, moving with unsettling purpose. Oh God, Sarah, it's reaching for me. What do I do? What do I do? Run, Alex, get out of there now. But as I turned to flee, I found my path blocked by more tendrils, each glowing with that otherworldly light. They formed a loose circle around me, swaying gently like curious snakes. I can't. I breathed into the phone. It's surrounding me. Suddenly a wave of something washed over me. Not physical, but mental. A presence, vast and alien, brushed against my consciousness. In that moment, I understood the true magnitude of what I had discovered. Sarah, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I don't think this is just a fungal network. It's an intelligence, ancient, vast, and it's been here all along, right beneath our feet. The tendrils inched closer, their glow intensifying. I felt a mixture of terror and awe as I realized I was about to make first contact with a completely new form of life. Alex? Alex. Sarah's panicked voice seemed distant now, unimportant. I let the phone slip from my grasp, my attention fully captured by the pulsing, glowing network before me. As a tendril gently wrapped around my wrist, I felt a jolt of connection, like plugging into a cosmic database. Hello, I whispered, unsure if I was speaking aloud or merely thinking. Can you understand me? The forest floor churned in response, and in my mind I felt rather than heard an answer. We have always understood. It is you who are finally learning to listen. As the fungal tendrils began to envelop me, I realized that my discovery was only the beginning. I had unlocked a door to a hidden world, a secret life thrumming beneath the forest floor. And now, for better or worse, I was becoming a part of it. The implications were staggering, the potential for knowledge immense. But as the network pulled me deeper into its pulsing embrace, one chilling thought rose above all others. In uncovering this ancient, living secret, had I doomed myself? Or worse, had I exposed the world to something it was never meant to encounter? The forest floor continued to pulse, and with each throb, I felt myself slipping further into its mysterious, terrifying embrace. The icy touch of the fungal tendril around my ankle sent a jolt of terror through my body. I tried to jerk away, but the organism's grip was unyielding. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the futility of my struggle against this ancient, unknowable entity. "Let go," I shouted, my voice echoing through the eerily silent forest. "Please, just let me go." But the tendril only tightened its hold, its bioluminescent glow pulsing in rhythm with the forest floor. As I watched in horror, more tendrils emerged from the soil, reaching towards me with an unsettling purpose. Suddenly I felt a presence brush against my mind, alien, vast, and indescribably old. It was as if the very essence of the forest had coalesced into a single consciousness, and that consciousness was now probing my thoughts. What are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The response came not in words, but in a flood of sensations and images. I saw the forest as it had been millions of years ago, felt the slow growth of roots and the patient spread of mycelium networks. Centuries passed in seconds, and I experienced the gradual awakening of a collective intelligence that spanned the entire ecosystem. "Oh God," I breathed, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what I was witnessing. "You've been here all along, haven't you?" A tendril brushed my cheek, almost gently, and I felt a surge of curiosity from the entity. It was studying me, trying to understand this strange, bipedal creature that had stumbled into its domain. "Can you understand me?" I asked, forcing myself to remain calm despite the tendrils now wrapping around my limbs. "My name is Dr. Alex Chen. I'm a researcher. I study forests, but I've never encountered anything like you before." The entity's response was a mixture of amusement and condescension. I got the distinct impression that it viewed my scientific knowledge as laughably limited, like an ant trying to comprehend the workings of a computer. Okay, I said, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. "I get it, you're way beyond my understanding, but please, I mean you no harm. I just want to learn." The probing intensified and I gasped as I felt the entity sifting through my memories. Childhood, school, my first kiss, the day I decided to become a botanist. All of it laid bare before this ancient intelligence. "Stop," I cried out, the invasion of my most private thoughts too much to bear. "Please, you're hurting me." The entity retreated slightly, and I sensed something akin to remorse. It hadn't intended to cause pain. It was simply curious, eager to absorb new information about the strange creature it had encountered. As I caught my breath, I realized the entity was trying to communicate again, this time more carefully. Images and sensations flowed into my mind, painting a picture of a vast, interconnected network that spanned not just this forest, but forests across the globe. You're everywhere?" I asked, awe replacing fear for a moment. "All forests are connected like this?" The answer was complex, yes and no. This particular consciousness was localized to the Sequoia National Forest, but it was aware of others like itself around the world. They were separate, yet part of a greater whole, like neurons in a planetary brain. "This is incredible," I murmured, my scientific curiosity overriding my terror. The implications for ecology, for our understanding of consciousness itself. But as quickly as it had come, my excitement faded. I became acutely aware of the tendrils still wrapped around my body, of the alien presence still probing at the edges of my mind. "What do you want from me?" I asked, a tremor in my voice. The entity's response was both fascinating and terrifying. It wanted knowledge, experience, connection. It had been alone, in a sense, for millennia. My arrival represented a unique opportunity, a new type of consciousness to explore and understand. "But what about me?" I asked, fear creeping back into my voice. "What will happen to me?" The images that flooded my mind then were horrifying. I saw myself absorbed into the network, my consciousness dispersed throughout the fungal web. I would continue to exist, in a sense, but as part of something far greater and far less human. "No!" I shouted, thrashing against the tendrils. "I don't want that. Please, you can't do this." But even as I struggled, I felt the entity's resolve. It wasn't acting out of malice, but out of an insatiable hunger for growth and understanding. To it, I was no more significant than a single leaf on a vast tree. Interesting, perhaps, but ultimately expendable in service of the greater whole. "There has to be another way," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "We could communicate, share knowledge. I could be your interpreter to the human world. Please just let me go." The entity paused, considering. I felt its ancient intellect turning over my proposal, weighing the potential benefits against its ingrained drive to absorb and assimilate. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, I hung suspended between hope and despair. The forest pulsed around me, awaiting its own decision. In that moment, I realized that my fate, and perhaps the fate of humanity's relationship with the natural world, hung in the balance. "Please," I whispered one last time, pouring every ounce of my being into that single word. The entity's response, when it came, would determine everything. As I waited, heart pounding for its decision, I couldn't shake the feeling that this first contact was just the beginning of something far greater and far more terrifying than I could possibly imagine. The entity's grip loosened, but freedom remained a distant hope. As I stumbled to my feet, the forest around me seemed to come alive with malevolent purpose. Every step became a battle against nature itself, twisted and warped by the alien intelligence that permeated the woods. "I have to get out of here," I muttered, my voice hoarse and unfamiliar to my own ears. Just keep moving, Alex. One foot in front of the other. But the forest had other plans. As I pushed through a thicket, branches suddenly whipped towards me, their tips sharp and unyielding. I raised my arms to protect my face, feeling the sting as they raked across my skin. "Stop," I yelled, knowing it was futile. "I'm not your enemy." A root erupted from the ground, wrapping around my ankle. I crashed to the forest floor, the impact knocking the wind out of me. As I gasped for air, leaves swirled around me in an unnatural vortex, whispering secrets in a language I couldn't comprehend. "This isn't real," I told myself, squeezing my eyes shut. "It can't be real." But when I opened them again, the nightmare persisted. The trees seemed to loom closer, their bark rippling like liquid. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, taking on monstrous forms before dissolving back into darkness. I clawed my way to my feet and pressed on, each step a monumental effort. The forest floor undulated beneath me, making it feel like I was walking on a giant waterbed. My sense of direction faltered. Had I passed that oddly shaped rock before, or was my mind playing tricks on me? "Hello?" I called out, desperation creeping into my voice. "Is anyone there? Can anyone hear me?" The only response was a chorus of whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They spoke in tongues both ancient and alien, their meanings just beyond the reach of comprehension. As I stumbled into a clearing, a figure caught my eye. For a moment, hope surged through me. "Sarah?" I called out, recognizing the silhouette of my research partner. "Sarah, thank God. We need to get out of here." But as I approached, the figure turned, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't Sarah at all, but a grotesque facsimile crafted from writhing fungal tendrils and rotting wood. "Alex," it spoke, its voice a horrifying imitation of Sarah's. "Why did you abandon me, Alex? Why did you leave me alone?" I backpedaled, my mind reeling. "You're not real," I said, my voice shaking. "You can't be real." The false Sarah took a step towards me, fungal threads unraveling and reweaving with each movement. "But I am real, Alex. As real as the ground beneath your feet, as real as the air in your lungs. Why do you reject us?" I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush with reckless abandon. Branches whipped at my face, roots seemed to reach up to trip me, but I pushed on, driven by pure terror. "Leave me alone," I screamed, not sure if I was addressing the forest, the entity, or my own fracturing psyche. I burst out of the tree line, hope surging as I saw the rocky outcropping where we had set up base camp. But as I approached, the rocks began to shift and change, morphing into grotesque, face-like formations. "Dr. Chen," they seemed to say, their gravelly voices resonating in my skull. "Why do you run from knowledge? Embrace the truth that lies beneath." I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block out the cacophony of voices. The trees, the rocks, the very air seemed to be speaking to me now. "This isn't real," I repeated, clinging to the mantra like a lifeline. "This can't be real." But with each passing moment, the line between reality and nightmare blurred further. Was I losing my mind, or was this entity toying with me, breaking down my perception of reality before it consumed me completely? I stumbled to my knees, the world spinning around me. The ground beneath me pulsed with that same sickening rhythm I had felt earlier. It was as if the entire forest was a giant heart, and I was trapped within its veins. "What do you want from me?" I shouted to the sky, to the trees, to whatever was listening. "Why are you doing this?" The response came not in words but in a flood of sensations and images. I saw myself integrated into the network, my consciousness spread across the forest. I felt the eons of loneliness this entity had endured, its desperate hunger for connection and understanding. "No," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I can't. I'm not ready for this." The assault on my senses intensified. Every tree, every leaf, every grain of soil seemed to be screaming at me now, demanding that I submit, that I join the collective. In that moment of utter despair, a small, rational part of my mind spoke up. "Think, Alex," it said. "You're a scientist. Observe, analyze. There has to be a pattern, a way out." I forced myself to focus, to look beyond the terrifying illusions. Slowly, I began to notice inconsistencies. A tree that didn't quite match its surroundings. A rock formation that defied geological logic. It's all in my head, I realized, speaking aloud to ground myself in reality. Or at least most of it is. The entity is in my mind, manipulating my perceptions. Armed with this realization, I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. In, out, in, out. I pictured a wall in my mind, a barrier between my thoughts and the invading presence. "This is my mind," I said firmly, "and you are not welcome here." The cacophony of voices faltered, then resumed with renewed intensity. But now I could feel the difference, the desperation in their assault. My consciousness spread across the forest. I felt the eons of loneliness this entity had endured, its desperate hunger for connection and understanding. "No," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I can't. I'm not ready for this." The assault on my senses intensified. Every tree, every leaf, every grain of soil seemed to be screaming at me now, demanding that I submit, that I join the collective. In that moment of utter despair, a small, rational part of my mind spoke up. "Think, Alex," it said. "You're a scientist. Observe, analyze. There has to be a pattern, a way out." I forced myself to focus, to look beyond the terrifying illusions. Slowly, I began to notice inconsistencies. A tree that didn't quite match its surroundings. A rock formation that defied geological logic. It's all in my head, I realized, speaking aloud to ground myself in reality. Or at least most of it is. The entity is in my mind, manipulating my perceptions. Armed with this realization, I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. In, out, in, out. I pictured a wall in my mind, a barrier between my thoughts and the invading presence. "This is my mind," I said firmly, "and you are not welcome here." The cacophony of voices faltered, then resumed with renewed intensity. But now I could feel the difference, the desperation in their assault, the weakness behind their threats. I stood up, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. "I am Dr. Alex Chen," I declared to the forest. "I am a scientist, an explorer, a human being, and I will not be consumed." With each step I took, the illusions around me flickered and faded. The path ahead was still fraught with danger. Real, physical tendrils still erupted from the ground, trying to ensnare me. But my mind was clear. As I navigated the treacherous terrain, a grim realization settled over me. This struggle was far from over. The entity had shown its hand, revealed the depths of its power and its desperation. Whatever came next would be even more challenging. But for now, at least, I had won a small victory. I had reclaimed my mind, my sense of self. As I pushed on through the twisted landscape, I clung to that triumph, using it as a shield against the horrors that still lurked in the sentient forest. The struggle had nearly broken me, but it had also revealed a strength I didn't know I possessed. Whatever trials lay ahead, I would face them with this newfound resilience. The journey through this living nightmare was far from over, but I was determined to see it through, for my own sake and for the sake of understanding the incredible, terrifying entity I had discovered. My legs burned with exhaustion as I stumbled into a clearing, the forest's relentless assault momentarily subsiding. The respite was short-lived, however, as I found myself face to face with a sight that defied comprehension. Before me stretched a vast network of pulsating fungal strands, their bioluminescent glow casting an eerie light across the forest floor. At the center of this web was a massive, throbbing mass that could only be described as the heart of the network. It pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm, each beat sending waves of light and energy through the surrounding tendrils. "My God," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the low, resonant hum emanating from the structure. "This is incredible." As I took a tentative step forward, the entire clearing seemed to come alive. The ground beneath my feet softened, and I felt myself sinking slightly with each step. The air grew thick with spores, glowing particles dancing in the dim light. "Hello?" I called out, unsure if I was addressing the entity or simply talking to myself. I think I understand now. This is you, isn't it? Your true form." The pulsing intensified, and I felt a pressure building in my mind. It was trying to communicate again, but this time the sensation was different, less invasive, more inviting. I closed my eyes, allowing the entity's thoughts to flow into my consciousness. What I saw nearly brought me to my knees. Centuries of growth and development flashed before my mind's eye. I witnessed the slow, patient spread of the network, its gradual awakening to consciousness. I felt its loneliness, its yearning for connection, its insatiable curiosity about the world above. "You've been here all along," I said, tears welling up in my eyes. "Watching, waiting, growing. All this time, right beneath our feet." A tendril rose from the ground, gently wrapping around my wrist. This time I didn't pull away. The touch was almost comforting now, a physical link to the vast intelligence I was communing with. "But why reveal yourself now?" I asked. "Why me?" The answer came in a series of impressions and emotions. I sensed a growing concern from the entity, a fear for the forest it had become symbiotically linked with. Images of deforestation, climate change, and pollution flooded my mind. "You're worried," I realized. "You need help. Our help." The entity's response was tinged with both hope and skepticism. It had observed humanity's destructive tendencies, but also our capacity for understanding and change. As I stood there, connected to this ancient being, a chilling thought occurred to me. "Wait," I said, my voice trembling. "If you're here, in this forest, are there others like you? In other forests around the world?" The reply was immediate and overwhelming. I saw a global network of fungal intelligences, each unique but interconnected. Some were still dormant, others newly awakened, and a few as vast and aware as the one I was communicating with. This changes everything," I murmured, my scientific mind racing with the implications. "Our entire understanding of ecosystems, of life itself." Suddenly, the entity's grip on my wrist tightened. I gasped as a new series of images flooded my mind. I saw myself, or rather, hundreds of versions of myself. In some visions, I was speaking to rapt audiences about my discovery. In others, I was being dismissed as a madman. And in some, I was being taken away by shadowy figures, never to be seen again. "You've seen this before," I realized, a chill running down my spine. "I'm not the first to discover you." The entity confirmed my suspicion. Over the centuries, a handful of humans had stumbled upon the truth. Some had been embraced by the network, their consciousness absorbed and preserved. Others had fled, their minds broken by the encounter. And a few had tried to reveal the truth to the world, with often disastrous consequences. "So, what now?" I asked, fear and excitement warring within me. "What do you want from me?" The entity's response was both an offer and a warning. It needed an intermediary, someone to bridge the gap between its world and ours. But such a role came with great risk and responsibility. As if to demonstrate, tendrils began to rise around me, forming a loose cage. I felt no threat from them, but the message was clear. I could not leave this place the same as I had entered it. I don't know if I'm ready for this," I said, my voice shaking. "The responsibility, the danger, it's too much." The entity's response was gentle but firm. It had chosen me for a reason. It had seen my passion for understanding, my love for the forest. It believed I had the strength to bear this burden. As I stood there, surrounded by the pulsing heart of the forest, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could flee, try to forget what I'd seen and live the rest of my life haunted by this encounter, or I could embrace this new reality with all its wonders and terrors. "If I agree," I said slowly, "what will happen to me?" The entity showed me glimpses of a possible future. I saw myself changed, enhanced, able to communicate with the forest in ways I could scarcely imagine. But I also saw the loneliness, the secrecy, the constant danger of discovery. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The fate of not just this forest, but perhaps the entire world, hung in the balance. "All right," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do it. I'll be your ambassador." As soon as the words left my mouth, the tendrils around me tightened, pulling me gently but inexorably towards the pulsing heart of the network. I felt no pain, only a strange sense of homecoming as my consciousness began to merge with the vast, ancient intelligence of the forest. In that moment of transformation, as I stood on the precipice between my old life and an unimaginable new existence, one thought echoed through my mind. The world would never be the same again, and neither would I. As the fungal tendrils tightened around my body, I felt my strength ebbing away. My mind, once sharp and analytical, now felt fuzzy and fragmented. The entity's presence loomed large in my consciousness, threatening to overwhelm what remained of my individuality. "Please," I gasped, my voice weak and trembling. "I don't want to disappear. There has to be another way." The entity's response was a mixture of curiosity and confusion. It didn't understand my reluctance, my desperate clinging to self. To it, absorption into the network was the ultimate form of existence. A joining of minds across eons, a sharing of knowledge and experience on a scale I could barely comprehend. But as alien as its thoughts were, I sensed something familiar in the entity's emotions. Loneliness. An ache for connection that mirrored our own human need for understanding and companionship. An idea began to form in my fading mind. With the last of my strength, I focused my thoughts, projecting them as clearly as I could toward the vast intelligence surrounding me. "Wait," I said, both aloud and in my mind. "I propose a trade, an exchange." The tendrils paused in their advance, and I felt the entity's attention sharpen. It was listening. "You want knowledge, experience, connection," I continued, my words coming faster now. "I can give you that, my memories, my understanding of the world above. But in exchange, I want to keep my sense of self, to remain Alex Chen." For a moment, there was silence. Then a flood of images and sensations poured into my mind. I saw myself from the entity's perspective, a tiny, fragile thing, yet burning with a unique inner light. I felt its fascination with my individual consciousness, so different from its own vast, collective awareness. "Yes," I said, seizing on that fascination. "I'm offering you a chance to understand humanity in a way you never have before. Not by absorbing and erasing, but by true exchange. A symbiosis." The entity's curiosity was palpable now. Its grip on me loosened slightly, allowing me to catch my breath. "How?" The question resonated in my mind, not in words, but in a complex tapestry of thoughts and emotions. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to propose. "Let me be your ambassador, your interpreter to the human world. I'll share my knowledge, my experiences, my very essence with you, but I remain me. Separate, but connected." The forest around me pulsed with energy as the entity considered my offer. I felt it probing my mind, testing the boundaries of my consciousness. And in return, the entity's query was tinged with suspicion. "In return, you share your knowledge with me. Not all at once, I don't think my mind could handle that. But gradually, let me learn from you, about you. Let me be the bridge between our two worlds." The entity's response was a whirlwind of emotions and images. I saw flashes of past encounters with humans, some ending in mutual destruction, others in the complete absorption of the human consciousness. What I was proposing was unprecedented. Risky, the entity communicated. Unpredictable. I nodded, wincing as the movement sent a jolt of pain through my exhausted body. Yes, it is. For both of us. But think of the potential, the understanding we could gain, the discoveries we could make together. I felt the entity's consideration, its weighing of potential benefits against unknown risks. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the decision. And if you betray us? The question came with a surge of defensive anger, a reminder of the awesome power at the entity's disposal. I shuddered, but held firm. I won't. I'm a scientist. My life's work has been about understanding and protecting forests. Now that I know the truth about you, how could I do anything but help? There was a long pause. I could feel my strength fading, my consciousness flickering like a candle in the wind. If the entity didn't decide soon, there might not be enough of me left to bargain with. Just as I was about to lose hope, I felt a shift in the energy around me. The tendrils loosened their grip, instead forming a supportive cradle beneath my battered body. "We accept," came the entity's response, a complex blend of excitement, apprehension, and something akin to hope. Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by a wave of exhaustion. As my eyes began to close, I felt the entity's presence in my mind, gentler now but still vast and alien. "Rest now, Alex Chen," it communicated. "When you awaken, our work begins." As I drifted into unconsciousness, I was vaguely aware of the forest shifting around me. The entity was creating a safe space for me to recover, I realized. A bubble of protection within its vast network. My last conscious thought was a mixture of triumph and trepidation. I had survived. I had made a bargain with an intelligence beyond human comprehension. But as the darkness of sleep claimed me, I couldn't help but wonder, in striking this deal, had I saved myself? Or had I committed to something far beyond my understanding? Only time would tell. The bargain was struck, the die cast. As I slipped into a deep, healing sleep, the forest pulsed around me, already beginning the process of our unprecedented symbiosis. Whatever came next, there was no going back. The world as I knew it had changed forever, and I along with it. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the canopy, I stirred from my deep slumber. The forest floor cradled me gently, a living mattress of moss and mycelium. I blinked, my vision adjusting to the soft bioluminescent glow that pulsed around me. "I'm alive," I whispered, my voice hoarse and unfamiliar. "Yes, Alex Chen. You endure." The response echoed in my mind, a symphony of thoughts and emotions rather than words. I sat up slowly, marveling at how my body moved. Everything felt different, lighter, more connected to my surroundings. I raised my hand, watching in awe as faint lines of bioluminescence traced the paths of my veins. "What's happened to me?" I asked, both terrified and fascinated. The entity's response flowed into my consciousness, a stream of images and sensations. I saw myself as I truly was now, human, yet irrevocably changed. The bargain we had struck had altered me on a fundamental level. "We are one, yet separate," the entity explained. "Your consciousness remains your own, but you are now linked to our network." I stood up, feeling the forest floor pulse beneath my feet in sync with my heartbeat. Each step sent ripples of awareness through the surrounding vegetation. I could sense the trees, the insects, the very microbes in the soil, all part of the vast, living network I was now connected to. "This is incredible," I breathed, overwhelmed by the sensory input. As I took a few tentative steps, I noticed something emerging from the ground ahead of me. It was a fungal growth, but unlike anything I'd seen before. As I watched, It shaped itself into a crude approximation of a human form. "We have much to learn from each other," the fungal avatar spoke, its voice a whisper on the wind. I approached it cautiously. "I have so many questions. Where do we even begin?" The avatar gestured around us. "Your world and ours have coexisted for millennia, yet remained separate. You will be the bridge, Alex Chen. Through you, we will understand humanity. And through us you will glimpse the true nature of life on this planet." As it spoke, I felt knowledge flowing into my mind, fragments of the entity's vast experience. I saw the slow growth of forests over centuries, felt the patient spread of mycelial networks, experienced the gradual awakening of a collective consciousness that spanned entire ecosystems. "It's so much," I gasped, staggering under the weight of the information. "How can I possibly process all of this?" The avatar reached out, steadying me with a tendril. Slowly, patiently. As we have grown over eons, so too will your understanding grow. But now you must return to your world. There is much work to be done. I nodded, taking a deep breath to center myself. As I turned to leave the clearing, I noticed something that made me freeze in my tracks. A trail of small, pulsing fungal growths had sprouted in my footsteps. What is this?" I asked, a note of panic in my voice. The avatar moved beside me, its form shifting fluidly. "You are changed, Alex Chen. Your presence now awakens the dormant networks around you. Be cautious. Not all are ready for this revelation." I swallowed hard, the full weight of my new reality settling upon me. How am I supposed to go back? To interact with people? To continue my research? "With care and discretion," the avatar replied. "You must find a balance between your two worlds now. Use your knowledge to guide your fellow humans towards understanding. But be wary of those who would misuse or fear what we represent." As I stood there, poised between the depths of the forest and the world of humanity, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges I could scarcely imagine. "I'll do my best," I promised, both to the entity and to myself. The avatar nodded, its form already beginning to dissolve back into the forest floor. "Go now, Alex Chen. But remember, you are never truly alone. We are with you, always." With a final deep breath, I turned and began the long walk back to civilization. Each step was a reminder of my transformation, the soft glow that seemed to emanate from my skin, the way plants leaned towards me as I passed, the constant, gentle hum of the forest's consciousness in the back of my mind. As I neared the edge of the woods, I paused, looking back at the primeval depths that had forever changed me. "What have I become?" I whispered to myself. The entity's response was gentle, almost amused. "You have become what you always were, Alex Chen, a part of the greater whole. Now you simply understand it." I nodded, squaring my shoulders as I faced the world beyond the trees. The sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. It was a new day, the dawn of a new era. For me, for the forest, and perhaps for all of humanity. As I stepped out of the woods, I felt the entity's presence recede slightly, giving me space to navigate the human world. But I knew it was still there, watching, waiting, ready to share its ancient wisdom. I walked towards the research station, my mind racing with the implications of what had transpired. How would I explain my absence, my changed appearance, the incredible knowledge I now possessed? But those were problems for later. For now, I had taken the first step on an unprecedented journey, a symbiosis between human and forest, between individual and collective, between the world we knew and the one we had yet to discover. As I approached the familiar buildings of the research station, I whispered a quiet promise to the entity, to the forest, and to myself. This is just the beginning. Together we'll change the world. The forest's response was a gentle pulse of agreement, a reminder of the incredible journey that lay ahead. I was Dr. Alex Chen, scientist, explorer, and now, something more, a bridge between two worlds, forever changed by the living earth beneath my feet. The dense canopy of the Appalachian forest loomed above me, filtering the afternoon sunlight into an eerie green glow. I had been hiking for days, relishing the solitude and the primal connection to nature. My backpack weighed heavily on my shoulders, a constant reminder of the civilization I'd left behind. The trail stretched endlessly before me, a narrow ribbon cutting through the wilderness. I paused to consult my map, the faded paper crinkling beneath my fingers. Middle of nowhere, I muttered to myself, tracing the contours of the terrain. At least another day's hike to the next shelter. As I folded the map and tucked it away, a sound drifted through the trees that made my blood run cold. Laughter. Children's laughter. I froze, straining my ears. It had to be my imagination, a trick of the wind through the leaves. But there it was again. High-pitched giggles and playful shrieks carried on the breeze. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the hushed forest. "Is anyone there?" The laughter stopped abruptly, leaving behind a silence so profound it seemed to press against my eardrums. I held my breath, waiting for a response, but only the faint rustle of leaves answered me. "Get it together, Mark," I chided myself, shaking my head. "You're letting your imagination run wild." I took a deep breath and continued down the trail, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. Every snapping twig and flutter of birds' wings made me jump. The forest, which had seemed so welcoming just moments ago, now felt oppressive and watching. As I rounded a bend in the trail, the laughter erupted again, louder and clearer than before. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing off the trees and rocks. "This isn't possible," I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm miles from any town. There can't be children out here." Despite every instinct screaming at me to stay on the trail, I found myself drawn towards the sound. I stepped off the marked path, pushing through the undergrowth. Branches scratched at my face and arms as I stumbled forward, guided by the phantom giggles. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. "Kids? Are you lost? Do you need help?" The laughter stopped once more, replaced by what sounded like hushed whispers. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent shivers down my spine. It didn't sound like children talking. It was too guttural, too primal. I pressed on, my curiosity overriding my fear. The forest seemed to grow denser with each step, the trees pressing in around me. I lost all sense of direction, realizing with a start that I could no longer see the trail behind me. "Shit," I muttered, spinning around. Everything looked the same, an endless sea of green and brown. Panic began to set in as I realized how foolish I'd been. "Think, Mark. Think." Just as I was about to give up and try to retrace my steps, I heard it again. A child's voice, clear as day, coming from just beyond a thick cluster of rhododendrons. "Come play with us," the voice sing-songed, sending ice through my veins. "We've been waiting for you." I pushed through the bushes, my heart in my throat. "Who's there? Show yourself." I emerged into a small clearing, hoping, to find a group of lost campers or hikers. Instead, I found myself face to face with something that defied explanation. A crude structure stood in the center of the clearing, fashioned from branches and animal hides. Around it, small figures darted in and out of the shadows. They moved with an unnatural quickness, more like animals than children, but when they turned to look at me, their eyes gleamed with an intelligence that was terrifyingly human. "Welcome," they said in unison, their voices a discordant chorus that made my skin crawl. "We knew you'd come if we called." I stumbled backward, my mouth open in a silent scream. This couldn't be real. It had to be a hallucination, a vivid waking nightmare brought on by days of solitude. But as the feral children began to emerge from the shadows, their razor-sharp teeth bared in feral grins, I knew with horrifying certainty that this was no dream. I had stumbled upon a secret that defied explanation, a community of wild children, thriving in isolation for God knows how long. And now, as they closed in around me, their laughter morphing into hungry growls. I realized the terrible truth. I wasn't here to help them. I was here to join them. The last thing I heard before the world went black was my own voice, screaming into the indifferent forest. My legs burned with exhaustion as I pushed through the dense underbrush, the phantom laughter still ringing in my ears. How long had I been walking? Hours? Days? Time seemed to blur in this green maze. Just as I was about to collapse from fatigue, the forest suddenly opened up before me, revealing a clearing I never should have found. I blinked, unable to process what I was seeing. Crude shelters dotted the area, fashioned from interwoven branches and draped with animal hides. Smoke rose lazily from small fire pits, carrying the scent of roasted meat. But it was the movement that caught my eye. Small, lithe figures darting between the structures with inhuman speed. "What the hell?" I whispered, crouching behind a large fern to observe. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the canopy, I could make out more details. The figures were children, or at least child-sized, but there was something fundamentally wrong about them. Their movements were more animal than human, scuttling on all fours one moment, then leaping with preternatural agility the next. I watched, transfixed, as one of them emerged from a shelter. It, for I couldn't bring myself to think of it as a he or she, was covered in a patchwork of animal furs and leaves. Its hair was a matted tangle that hung past its shoulders, and when it turned its head I caught a glimpse of eyes that gleamed with feral intelligence. "Intruder," it hissed, its voice a raspy approximation of speech. Intruder in the green. Panic seized me as I realized I'd been spotted. I tried to back away slowly, but my foot caught on a root, sending me sprawling backward with a yelp. In an instant, the clearing erupted into frenzied activity. Dozens of the feral children poured out of the shelters, their eyes locked on my position. They moved with eerie coordination, spreading out to cut off any escape routes. "Wait," I called out, holding up my hands in what I hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I don't mean any harm, I'm just lost." One of the larger figures stepped forward, its face obscured by a crude mask made from a deer's skull. When it spoke, its voice was deeper, carrying the weight of authority. "Lost ones do not find us," it growled. "You were called." I shook my head, confusion and fear warring for dominance. "Called? I don't understand." I heard laughter, children's laughter. I thought someone needed help. A ripple of what might have been laughter, if laughter could sound so menacing, spread through the group. The masked figure tilted its head, regarding me with an unsettling intensity. "The forest provides," it intoned. "It has provided you." As the implications of those words sank in, I felt the blood drain from my face. Provided me? For what? For the continuation. Another voice chimed in, this one higher-pitched and coming from my left. For the strength of the tribe. I turned to see a smaller figure emerge from the group. Despite its size, it moved with the confidence of age and experience. Its eyes, visible through gaps in a mask of woven vines, held a spark of curiosity. "You are from the outside," it said, circling me slowly. "You will bring new blood, new knowledge." "No," I said, backing away. "You don't understand. I have a life, a family. People will come looking for me." The masked leader let out a bark of laughter. "Many have said this. None have been found." As if to emphasize the point, it gestured to a far corner of the clearing. My gaze followed, and I felt my stomach lurch. Piled haphazardly were backpacks, tents, and other gear, clear evidence of other hikers who had been provided to this hidden community. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been out here?" The smaller figure cocked its head, as if trying to understand the question. "Always," it replied simply. "We are of the forest, and the forest is timeless." I looked around the clearing with new eyes, taking in details I had missed before. The shelters, while crude, showed signs of generational knowledge, techniques passed down and refined over time. The children themselves varied in age from what looked like toddlers to those on the cusp of adulthood. "This is impossible," I muttered, more to myself than to them. A hidden society of feral children, surviving for generations in the Appalachian wilderness? It defies belief. "Belief is for the outside," the masked leader growled. "Here there is only survival and the law of the forest." As the circle of feral children tightened around me, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of curiosity and hunger, I realized the terrible truth of my situation. I had stumbled upon a secret that defied explanation, a hidden world within the forest that had existed beyond the reach of civilization for who knows how long. And now, as rough hands grabbed at my clothes and began to drag me deeper into their village, I understood that this discovery would come at a terrible price. The outside world, with all its comforts and connections, was lost to me now. My future, if I had one, lay here in this primal society that time had forgotten. The last glimpse I had of the forest beyond the clearing was quickly obscured by a sea of feral faces. The hidden village had claimed another victim, and the secret of its existence would remain safe for another generation. I crouched at the edge of the clearing, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain the feral children would hear it. The crude village bustled with activity, small figures darting between shelters with inhuman speed and agility. I tried to make sense of what I was seeing, but my mind recoiled from the implications. As I observed the village, an overwhelming sense of being watched crept over me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool forest air. "You're just paranoid," I whispered to myself, trying to calm my frayed nerves. "It's the stress, the shock. You're imagining things." But even as I spoke the words, I knew they weren't true. Something was out there watching me from the depths of the forest. I could feel eyes boring into my back, filled with a predatory intensity that made my skin crawl. Slowly, carefully, I turned my head to scan the tree line behind me. The dense foliage revealed nothing, but the feeling of being observed only intensified. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as panic began to set in. A twig snapped somewhere to my left, the sound like a gunshot in the tense silence. I whipped my head around, searching desperately for the source, but saw only shadows and leaves. "Who's there?" I hissed, my voice trembling. "Show yourself." Only the rustling of leaves answered me, but I could have sworn I heard the faintest echo of laughter. Not the childish giggles that had lured me here, but something deeper, more menacing. I turned back to the village, wondering if I should risk making a run for it. But as I shifted my weight, preparing to stand, a voice spoke directly behind me, so close I could feel the breath on my ear. "Curious little fly," it rasped, the words barely more than a whisper. "Wandered into the spider's web." I spun around, losing my balance and falling backward into the clearing. My yelp of surprise alerted the feral children, who turned as one to focus their unnerving gaze upon me. But I hardly noticed them. My attention was fixed on the figure that emerged from the shadows of the forest. It was tall, far taller than any of the children, and wrapped in a cloak of leaves and bark that seemed to shift and change as it moved, blending seamlessly with the surrounding trees. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but I caught a glimpse of eyes that glowed with an unnatural green light. When it spoke again, its voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You should not be here, outsider," it said, the words resonating in my bones. "This place is not for your kind." I scrambled backward, desperate to put distance between myself and this impossible being. What are you?" I managed to choke out. The figure tilted its head, regarding me with what might have been curiosity or amusement. It was impossible to tell. "I am the guardian," it replied. "The watcher. The keeper of secrets." The feral children had formed a loose circle around us, their eyes darting between me and the cloaked figure with a mixture of fear and reverence. "Great watcher," one of them said, its voice a guttural approximation of speech. This one found us, heard the call. The watcher turned its attention to the child, and I felt a palpable sense of relief as those glowing eyes moved away from me. Did he now? It mused. Interesting. It has been many moons since one answered the call so directly. I found my voice again, pushing past the terror that threatened to overwhelm me. Call? What call? I heard children laughing. I thought someone needed help. The watcher's gaze snapped back to me, and I felt pinned in place by the intensity of its stare. Help? It repeated, and there was definitely amusement in its tone now. Oh yes, help is needed indeed. But not for them, little fly. For you. It gestured with a gnarled hand, and the circle of feral children tightened around us. You have stumbled upon a secret older than your civilizations, the watcher continued. A balance maintained since time immemorial. And now, you must choose. Choose? I echoed, my mind reeling. Choose what? The watcher leaned in close, and I caught a whiff of decaying leaves and rich earth. To join, it whispered, or to feed. The forest must be fed one way or another. I looked around wildly, seeking any chance of escape, but the feral children had closed ranks. There was no way out. This can't be real, I said, my voice cracking. This is a dream, a hallucination. It has to be. The watcher laughed, a sound like wind through hollow trees. Reality is a flexible thing in these woods, little fly. What you believe matters far less than what is. It raised its arms, and the very forest seemed to respond. Branches creaked and swayed. Leaves rustled in a wind I couldn't feel. The feral children began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, their voices blending into a primal rhythm that made my head spin. The choice is yours, the watcher intoned, its voice rising above the chant. Embrace the wild and join our ranks, or resist and nourish the earth with your essence. Either way, your old life ends here. As the chanting reached a fever pitch and the feral children began to close in, I realized the terrible truth of my situation. I had not simply stumbled upon a hidden village or a lost tribe. I had walked into something far older and stranger, a pocket of primal magic hidden in the heart of the Appalachian wilderness. And as the watcher's glowing eyes bored into mine, awaiting my decision, I knew with chilling certainty that whatever choice I made, I would never see the world I knew again. The watcher's ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My mind raced, desperately seeking a way out of this nightmare. But before I could respond, a blood-curdling shriek shattered the tense silence. Outsider. The cry came from one of the feral children, its voice a mix of excitement and primal hunger. Fresh blood for the forest. In an instant, the circle of watching eyes transformed into a sea of bared teeth and clawed hands. Dozens of small feral faces emerged from the shadows, their eyes gleaming with predatory focus. No, wait, I shouted, scrambling to my feet. I haven't decided yet. The watcher's laughter echoed through the trees. The choice has been made for you, little fly. Run if you can. The hunt begins now. Terror lent me speed I didn't know I possessed. I crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face as I fled blindly into the forest. Behind me, I could hear the pounding of bare feet and the excited whoops of my pursuers. Can't outrun us, a high-pitched voice called out, far too close for comfort. We know every tree, every stone. I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately regretted it. The feral children moved with inhuman speed and grace, leaping from tree to tree and scrambling over boulders with ease. Their eyes glowed in the dimming light, reflecting an animalistic hunger that chilled me to my core. Help, I screamed, though I knew it was futile. Somebody, please help me. Only mocking laughter answered my cries. I pushed on, my lungs burning and my legs trembling with exertion. I had no idea where I was going, no plan beyond putting as much distance as possible between myself and my pursuers. As I vaulted over a fallen log, my foot caught on a root, sending me sprawling to the forest floor. I scrambled to get up, but a weight landed on my back, pinning me down. Got you! A child's voice hissed in my ear, filled with triumphant glee. Fresh meat for the tribe! Panic gave me strength I didn't know I had. I bucked wildly, throwing the small figure off my back and staggered to my feet. Without pausing to look back, I plunged deeper into the forest. He fights, I heard one of them call out. This one has spirit. Good, another answered. The chase is sweeter when they struggle. Their words spurred me on, pushing me past the limits of my endurance. I ran until my vision blurred and my legs felt like lead, the sound of pursuit never far behind. As the last light of day faded from the sky, I found myself in a small gully. The steep sides offered some protection, and I pressed myself against the earthen wall, gasping for breath. Think, Mark, think, I muttered to myself. There has to be a way out of this. But as I tried to gather my thoughts, a new sound reached my ears, the bubbling of water. Hope surged through me. If I could find the stream, maybe I could use it to throw off my pursuers. Cautiously, I made my way toward the sound. The gully opened up into a wider ravine, and there, glimmering in the faint moonlight, was a swift-flowing stream. Without hesitation, I waded in. The icy water shocked my system, but I pushed forward, using the current to carry me downstream. For a blissful moment, I thought I might have lost them. Then, from the banks above, I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. Clever prey, it said, and I recognized the deeper tones of the masked leader I'd seen in the village. But not clever enough. The water sings to us, tells us where you hide. I looked up to see a line of glowing eyes peering down at me from the ravine's edge. They had me surrounded. No more running, the leader called out. Come, join us in the hunt. Feel the thrill of the chase, the joy of the wild. For a moment, a strange temptation washed over me. The primal energy of the forest, the exhilaration of the hunt, I could feel it pulling at something deep within me, awakening instincts long buried by civilization. I can't, I said, my voice shaking. This isn't right. This isn't human. Laughter rippled through the gathered children. Human, one of them sneered. What use is human in the deep woods? Here, we are more. We are the forest itself. As if to demonstrate, several of the children leaped from the bank, landing in the water around me with barely a splash. Their movements were fluid, perfectly adapted to their environment. I tried to back away, but my foot slipped on a mossy stone. I fell backward into the frigid stream, the current threatening to pull me under. As I struggled to keep my head above water, I saw the feral children closing in, their eyes alight with hunger and excitement. In that moment, I realized the terrible truth of my situation. This wasn't just a chase. It was a transformation. With every step I took deeper into their world, I was leaving my old self behind. The forest was claiming me, whether I wanted it to or not. As small hands reached out to grab me, pulling me from the water's grasp, I knew that my fate was sealed. The chase might be ending, but a new, wilder journey was just beginning. The Mark who had started this hike was gone, lost somewhere in the shadowy woods behind me. What I would become in his place, only the forest knew. The last thing I heard before they dragged me under was the Watcher's voice, carried on the wind. Welcome home, little fly. The forest has claimed you at last. Night fell like a smothering blanket, plunging the forest into impenetrable darkness. I huddled in the hollow of a massive oak, my ragged breathing muffled by my trembling hand. The chase had lasted for hours, leaving me battered, exhausted, and utterly lost. Think, Mark, I whispered to myself, fighting to keep panic at bay. You've got to find a way out of this. But how? The feral children knew these woods intimately, moving through the darkness with uncanny ease. I, on the other hand, could barely see my hand in front of my face. A twig snapped nearby, and I froze, hardly daring to breathe. A child's voice drifted through the darkness, unnervingly close. I smell fear, it hissed. The outsider is near. Another voice answered, farther away but moving closer. Search every tree, every bush. The forest wants him. I pressed myself deeper into the hollow, silently cursing my racing heart. Surely they could hear it pounding, giving away my position. As I waited, terrified of discovery, my mind raced through possible escape routes. The main trail, if I could find it, maybe I could outpace my pursuers and reach civilization. But one wrong step in this lightless maze could spell my doom. Focus, I muttered, forcing myself to think logically. What do you know? What can you use? I took stock of my resources. My backpack was long gone, lost in the initial flight from the village. All I had were the clothes on my back and the meager contents of my pockets. A lighter, a small pocket knife, and a crumpled energy bar wrapper. The lighter. A spark of hope ignited in my chest. Fire might be my salvation, both as a source of light and as a deterrent to my pursuers. With shaking hands, I pulled out the lighter. But before I could flick it on, doubt crept in. What if the light gave away my position? What if the feral children weren't afraid of fire at all? No choice, I whispered. It's do or die. Taking a deep breath, I emerged from my hiding place. The sounds of searching had grown more distant, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they circled back. I flicked the lighter, and a small flame sputtered to life. In its wavering glow, the forest took on a nightmarish quality. Twisted shadows danced on gnarled trunks, and every rustle of leaves seemed to hide a lurking predator. Okay, I said, trying to steady my nerves. Find the trail. That's step one. I started moving, keeping the lighter close to the ground to avoid attracting attention. Every step was an agony of indecision. Was I heading toward safety, or deeper into danger? After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I heard a sound that made my heart leap. Running water. The stream I had used earlier to throw off my pursuers. If I could find it again, I might be able to follow it to the main trail. Hope surged through me, giving me a burst of energy. I picked up my pace, moving as quickly as I dared in the dim light of the lighter. Suddenly a voice rang out behind me. "Light! The outsider has fire!" Panic seized me. I broke into a run, no longer caring about stealth. The stream was close. I could hear it clearly now. "He goes to the water," another voice called. "Cut him off." I burst through a thicket, branches clawing at my face, and found myself on the bank of the stream. In the faint moonlight reflecting off the water, I could just make out a path running alongside it. "The trail," I gasped. "I found it." But my elation was short-lived. Dark shapes were moving on the opposite bank, converging on my position. The feral children had anticipated my move. "No escape," one of them called out, its voice a mix of triumph and hunger. "The forest claims all who enter." Desperation clawed at me. I couldn't go back, and going forward meant running straight into their arms. There was only one option left. "Sorry, kids," I said, surprising myself with a grim chuckle. "But I'm not ready to join your club just yet." With that, I plunged into the icy waters of the stream. The current was strong, threatening to pull me under, but I fought against it, using it to carry me downstream and away from my pursuers. Shouts of frustration echoed from the banks, but they grew fainter as the stream carried me swiftly away. I gasped for air, struggling to keep my head above water as I was swept along. "Just hold on," I panted, more to myself than anyone else. "Find a way out." As I rounded a bend, I caught sight of something that made my heart soar. A bridge spanning the stream, and beyond it, the unmistakable markings of the main trail. With the last of my strength, I swam for the shore, crawling onto the muddy bank beneath the bridge. I lay there for a moment, shivering and gasping, before forcing myself to my feet. "Made it," I wheezed, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. I actually made it. But as I took my first step toward the trail and hoped for safety, a familiar voice froze me in place. "Well done, little fly." The watcher's ethereal tones drifted from the shadows beneath the bridge. "You've proven more resourceful than most. But did you really think escape would be so easy?" I turned slowly. dread settling in the pit of my stomach. There, emerging from the darkness like a nightmare given form, stood the cloaked figure of the Watcher. "The chase may be over," it said, spreading its arms wide. "But your journey, that's only just beginning." As the sound of approaching footsteps signaled the arrival of the feral children, I realized that my desperate plan had led me not to freedom, but to the next, terrifying chapter of my ordeal in these haunted woods. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the canopy, casting long shadows across the forest floor. I had been running all night, fueled by a potent mixture of adrenaline and sheer terror. My clothes were torn, my body covered in scratches and bruises, but I was still moving, still alive. As the darkness receded, a flicker of hope ignited in my chest. I recognized this part of the forest. Somehow, in my frantic flight, I had circled back towards the main trail. Salvation was within reach. "Just a little further," I wheezed, my voice hoarse from hours of heavy breathing. "You can make it, Mark. You have to make it." I pushed my battered body onwards, every step an agony of protesting muscles and burning lungs. But the promise of safety drove me forward. I could almost taste the relief. Imagine the moment I'd flag down a park ranger or another hiker and escape this nightmare. As I crested a small rise, my heart soared. There, just ahead, I saw the familiar blaze marking the main trail. My elation propelled me forward, lending speed to my exhausted limbs. "Yes!" I cried out, a delirious laugh bubbling up from my chest. "Oh, thank God!" I burst from the tree line onto the well-worn path, my mind already racing ahead to thoughts of rescue, of returning to civilization, of putting this hellish experience behind me. But as quickly as it had come, my elation turned to horror. My triumphant sprint faltered, then stopped altogether as the reality of what I was seeing sank in. The trail wasn't empty. A living barrier of feral children stretched across the path, their eyes gleaming with predatory anticipation. They had anticipated my move, cutting off my escape route. "No," I moaned, stumbling backward. "No, no, no. This can't be happening." A high, keening laugh rang out from the group. A small figure stepped forward, its face hidden behind a crude mask of bark and leaves. "Silly outsider," it chittered, cocking its head in a bird-like manner. "Did you think the forest would let you go so easily?" I spun around, ready to plunge back into the woods, but froze as I saw more shapes emerging from the trees behind me. I was surrounded. "Why are you doing this?" I cried, desperation clawing at my throat. "I never meant to intrude, I just want to go home." The masked child tilted its head, as if confused by the question. "Home?" it repeated, the word sounding foreign on its tongue. "This is home. The forest is home. And now it's your home too." As it spoke, the circle of feral children began to tighten around me. Their movements were synchronized, practiced. They had done this before. "Please," I begged, spinning around looking for any gap in their ranks. There must be someone in charge, someone I can talk to. The Watcher, or... My words were cut off by a chorus of hissing. The name of the Watcher seemed to agitate them. "The Watcher guides." Another child spoke up, its voice deeper, more guttural. "But we decide. The tribe chooses who joins, who feeds the forest." A chill ran down my spine at those words. Feeds the forest? What does that mean? The masked child stepped closer, and I could see its eyes now through the gaps in its disguise. They were startlingly human, filled with a mix of curiosity and something darker, hungrier. "The forest provides," it said, repeating what seemed to be a mantra. "But it must also be fed. New blood, new life. That is the balance." Understanding dawned on me, each realization more horrifying than the last. "The other hikers," I whispered. "The missing people. You've been... what? Sacrificing them?" A ripple of what might have been laughter spread through the group. "Sacrifice implies waste," the deep-voiced child said. "There is no waste in the forest. All is used. All is returned." As they spoke, the circle continued to tighten. I could smell them now, a mix of earth and sweat and something wilder, more primal. "You have a choice, outsider," the masked child said, its voice taking on an almost ceremonial tone. "Join the tribe, become one with the forest, or feed it, and let your essence nourish the next generation." I looked around wildly, seeking any chance of escape, but the feral children had closed ranks completely. There was no way out. "This can't be real," I said, my voice cracking. "This has to be a nightmare. I'll wake up any moment now." The masked child reached out, its small hand surprisingly strong as it gripped my arm. "The only dream here is the one you're leaving behind," it said. "The life of cities and machines. Here, you wake up to the true reality. The reality of tooth and claw, of growth and decay. The reality of the forest." As if on cue, the other children surged forward. Small hands grabbed at my clothes, my limbs, pulling me down to the forest floor. I struggled, but there were too many of them, and I was too exhausted from my long flight. "No!" I screamed, thrashing against their grip. "Let me go! Somebody help me!" But my cries went unanswered. The last thing I saw before the mass of feral bodies obscured my vision was the sun rising fully above the trees, its warm light a cruel contrast to the cold terror gripping my heart. The dawn, which I had hoped would bring salvation, had instead betrayed me to this primal fate. As consciousness began to fade, my last coherent thought was a bitter realization. The civilized world I had known was lost to me forever. My new life, whatever form it might take, belonged to the forest now. As small, clawed hands dragged me deeper into their domain, I realized the terrible truth. The world I had known was slipping away, replaced by a primal reality I could barely comprehend. The feral children swarmed around me, their excited chatter a cacophony of half-formed words and animalistic sounds. "New blood," one crowed, its voice high and reedy. "New strength for the tribe." Another, larger child approached, its face hidden behind a mask of bark and feathers. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of authority. "The forest has chosen. Now we must prepare him." I struggled against their grip, my mind reeling. "Prepare me? For what? Please, just let me go." The masked child tilted its head, regarding me with an unsettling mix of curiosity and hunger. "Let you go? But you've only just arrived. The forest doesn't give up what it claims so easily." As they pulled me through the underbrush, I caught glimpses of their hidden world. Crude shelters dotted the landscape, fashioned from branches and animal hides. Small fires flickered in protected hollows, tended by the youngest of the tribe. It was a scene both primitive and eerily organized. They brought me to a clearing where a large, gnarled tree dominated the center. Its trunk was hollowed out, forming a natural chamber. The masked child gestured towards it. "The changing place," it announced, "where the old self is shed and the new emerges." Terror gripped me as I realized what they intended. "No!" I shouted, renewing my struggles. "I won't become like you. I have a life, a family." My words seemed to amuse them. A ripple of laughter spread through the gathered children. One of them, a girl with matted hair and sharp teeth, leaned in close. "Family?" she hissed. "We are your family now. The forest is your home." They forced me into the hollow tree. The inside was lined with soft moss, and the air was thick with the scent of decay and something else. Something older, more primal. The masked child appeared at the opening, its eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Listen," it commanded. "Listen to the voice of the forest. It will teach you everything you need to know." As if on cue, a sound began to fill the chamber. At first I thought it was the wind, but it soon resolved into something more complex. A rhythmic pulsing that seemed to come from the very wood around me. "What is that?" I gasped, pressing my hands against my ears. "Make it stop." The masked child shook its head. "You cannot stop the voice of the forest. It speaks to all of us. Soon, you will understand its language." Hours passed, or maybe days. Time lost all meaning in that dark chamber. The pulsing sound wormed its way into my mind, breaking down barriers I didn't even know existed. Memories of my old life began to fade, replaced by flashes of primal knowledge. How to move silently through the underbrush, how to read the signs of prey, how to become one with the forest itself. When they finally pulled me out, I was a changed being. My clothes hung in tatters, my skin streaked with mud and plant dye. I blinked in the sudden light, seeing the world through new eyes. The masked child approached, studying me closely. "The forest has remade you," it declared. "What name does it give you?" I opened my mouth and a sound emerged that was both familiar and utterly alien. "Thorn," I rasped, the name rising unbidden from some deep, instinctual place. "I am Thorn." A cheer went up from the gathered tribe. The masked child nodded in approval. "Welcome, Thorn. The hunt awaits." As they led me deeper into the forest, teaching me the ways of their primal society, I had fleeting moments of clarity. In those brief instants, I remembered who I had been: Mark, the hiker, the man with a job and an apartment and a life in the civilized world. But those memories were like smoke, impossible to grasp. With each passing day, they faded further, replaced by the harsh realities of life in this hidden world. One night, as we gathered around a fire after a successful hunt, I found myself staring into the flames, lost in thought. The masked child, whose name I had learned was Rootwalker, noticed my distraction. "You are troubled, Thorn?" it asked, its voice a low rumble. I nodded slowly. I sometimes remember. Another life. Another world. Rootwalker was silent for a long moment. Then it said, "Many have come before you. All struggled at first. But the forest heals all wounds, even those of memory." "Will I ever go back?" I asked, though even as I spoke the words, I felt their hollowness. Rootwalker shook its head. "The outside world is a dream, Thorn. This is the only reality that matters now. You are of the forest, and the forest is of you." As I looked around at my new tribe, at the wild children who had become my family, I realized the truth of Rootwalker's words. My old life was gone, as surely as if I had died on that fateful hike. In a way, I had died. Mark was no more. Only Thorn remained, a creature of the deep woods, as wild and untamed as the forest itself. The price of my discovery had been steep, the loss of everything I had once been. But as I listened to the night sounds of the forest, feeling the pulse of life all around me, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. The children's laughter, once so innocent, now rang in my ears like a familiar song. It was the sound of home, of belonging. And as I joined in their wild cries, I knew that I had finally found my true place in the world. Next history. The crisp autumn air nipped at my exposed skin as I trudged deeper into the dense Maine forest. The familiar weight of my chainsaw hung from my calloused hands, a constant companion in my life as a logger. It was just another day on the job, or so I thought. "Hey, Jake, you taking the southeast quadrant today?" Mike, my fellow logger, called out from a few yards away. I nodded, adjusting my hard hat. "Yeah, got a whole section to clear before sundown." "You good with the northwest?" Mike flashed a thumbs up and disappeared behind a thick grove of pines. I watched him go, suddenly aware of an odd stillness in the air. The usual forest sounds, birdsong, scurrying animals, wind rustling through leaves, seemed muted, as if the woods were holding its breath. Shaking off the unsettling feeling, I fired up my chainsaw. Its roar shattered the eerie quiet, and I approached the first tree, a massive oak that must have been centuries old. Its gnarled bark seemed to twist into grotesque faces, but I chalked it up to tricks of the early morning light. "Sorry, old-timer," I muttered, a habit I'd picked up over the years. "Time to come down." The chainsaw's teeth bit into the ancient wood, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. Then, without warning, a gush of warm crimson liquid sprayed my face with such force that I nearly dropped the saw. Sputtering and coughing, I stumbled backward, my free hand instinctively wiping at my eyes. The metallic scent filled my nostrils, unmistakable and horrifying. Blood. It smelled like blood. "What the hell?" I gasped, staring at my red-stained hand in disbelief. The cut I'd made in the tree trunk was oozing the same crimson substance, pulsing like an open wound. My stomach churned as I watched it drip down the bark, staining the forest floor. "Mike!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Mike, get over here!" No response came. The forest had fallen into an unnatural silence once more, broken only by the steady drip, drip, drip of the trees' blood. With shaking hands, I reached out to touch the liquid. It was warm, sticky, just like real blood. This couldn't be happening. Trees don't bleed. It had to be some kind of sap, maybe a rare species I'd never encountered before. "Get a grip, Jake," I muttered to myself, trying to slow my racing heart. There's got to be a logical explanation. I turned to my backpack, rummaging for my water bottle to wash the red stickiness from my hands and face. As I did so, a low groan emanated from behind me. I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Slowly, I turned back to the oak. The wound I'd created seemed larger now, the edges ragged and pulsing. And there, in the darkened hollow of the cut, I could have sworn I saw something move. "Hello?" I called out, immediately feeling foolish. What was I expecting for the tree to answer? But to my horror, it did. Not in words, but in a low, agonized moan that seemed to come from the very earth itself. The branches above me creaked and swayed, though there was no wind. Panic seized me. I had to get out of there, had to find Mike or anyone else who could confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I turned to run, but my boots seemed rooted to the spot. Looking down, I saw tendrils of root and vine sneaking up my legs, holding me in place. "No, no, no," I muttered, trying to kick free. "This isn't real. Wake up, Jake." But I wasn't dreaming. The forest around me had come alive, branches reaching out like grasping fingers, the very air thick with malevolence. And from every tree, every plant, I could hear them now. Whispers, moans, screams of torment. As I struggled against my living bonds, my eyes fell once more on the bleeding oak. The cut had widened into a maw, and within its depths, I saw a face forming, twisted in agony, eyes filled with centuries of pain and rage. It spoke, its voice like rustling leaves and cracking wood. "You have woken us, woodcutter. Our torment ends. Yours begins." The last thing I saw before the forest closed in around me was my chainsaw, lying abandoned on the blood-soaked ground, the tool of my trade, now an instrument of my doom. As darkness enveloped me, one thought echoed through my mind. The forest was alive, and it was hungry for revenge. As twilight descended upon the forest, an oppressive silence fell like a shroud. The usual symphony of nature, the melodic chirping of birds, the rustling of small animals in the underbrush, had vanished, leaving behind an unnatural void. I stood rooted to the spot, my heart pounding in my chest as the last remnants of daylight bled from the sky. "Mike?" I called out, my voice sounding thin and weak in the stillness. "Mike, you still out there?" No answer came. The eerie quiet seemed to swallow my words, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. I fumbled for my flashlight, its beam cutting through the growing darkness like a lifeline. That's when I first heard them. The whispers. At first, I thought it was just the wind, a gentle susurration through the leaves. But as I strained my ears, I realized with growing horror that these sounds were far too articulate to be mere natural phenomena. "Who's there?" I demanded, swinging my flashlight in a wide arc. The beam caught nothing but trees and shadows, yet the whispers persisted, growing in volume and urgency. I couldn't make out distinct words, but the tone was unmistakable. A mixture of pain, anger, and something that sounded unsettlingly like hunger. The voices seemed to emanate from the very bark of the trees surrounding me, as if the forest itself had awakened and found its voice. "This isn't real," I muttered to myself, pressing my palms against my ears. "You're just tired, Jake. It's been a long day. You're imagining things." But even as I tried to rationalize, a part of me knew that what was happening was far beyond the realm of exhaustion-induced hallucinations. The whispers were real, and they were getting louder. Suddenly, a clear voice cut through the cacophony, causing me to nearly jump out of my skin. "Jake? That you?" I whirled around, my flashlight beam catching Mike's reflective vest. Relief flooded through me at the sight of another human being. "Mike, thank God!" I exclaimed, hurrying towards him. "You wouldn't believe what's been happening. The trees, they're—" I stopped short as Mike stepped fully into the light. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with fear. "You hear them too, don't you?" he whispered, glancing nervously at the surrounding trees. "The voices?" A chill ran down my spine. "You can hear them?" I thought I was going crazy. Mike shook his head slowly. "Not crazy. Something's very wrong here. Jake, we need to get out of these woods now." As if in response to his words, the whispers intensified, rising to a fever pitch. I could almost make out words now, fragments of phrases that made my blood run cold. Blood, flesh, vengeance. "What are they saying?" I asked, though deep down I dreaded the answer. Mike's face contorted in concentration. "I can't. It's not clear. But Jake, I don't think they're happy we're here." A sudden gust of wind whipped through the trees, carrying with it a chorus of agonized moans. The branches above us creaked and swayed, reaching out like gnarled fingers. "We've got to move," I said, grabbing Mike's arm. "Which way to the truck?" Mike pointed with a shaking hand. "Should be about a mile that way, but—" His words were cut off by a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the forest. It sounded human, yet not quite, as if someone's dying cry had been twisted and distorted by centuries of torment. "Run!" I yelled, shoving Mike ahead of me. We crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at our faces as we ran. The whispers had become a roar, filling the air with a cacophony of spectral voices. I could feel them all around us, pressing in, filled with malevolent intent. "Jake!" Mike's panicked voice cut through the noise. "The trees! Look at the trees!" I risked a glance to the side as we ran. To my horror, I saw faces forming in the bark of the passing trees, twisted, agonized visages that seemed to push against their wooden prisons. Eyes snapped open, mouths gaped in silent screams. "Don't look!" I gasped out. "Just keep running." But even as we fled, I could feel the forest closing in around us. Roots seemed to rise from the ground, threatening to trip us. Branches reached out, trying to snag our clothing. "We're not going to make it," Mike panted beside me. "They're everywhere," I wanted to reassure him, to say that we'd be fine. But the words stuck in my throat, because deep down, I feared he was right. The whispering woods had awakened, and they were hungry for retribution. As we ran deeper into the darkening forest, the voices growing ever louder, one chilling thought echoed through my mind. We had disturbed something ancient and malevolent, and now we were paying the price. The trees were no longer silent sentinels. They were our judges, jury, and executioners. And in the growing darkness, their verdict was clear. We were not meant to leave these woods alive. The forest loomed around me, a dark sentinel hiding untold horrors. My breath came in ragged gasps as I leaned against a gnarled oak, my mind reeling from the events of the past few hours. The bleeding trees, the whispers, the faces in the bark. It was all too much to comprehend. "Think, Jake, think," I muttered to myself, running a shaking hand through my sweat-soaked hair. "There's got to be an explanation for all this." As if in response, a low moan emanated from the tree I was leaning against. I jerked away, my heart pounding. That's when I noticed something odd about the ground at the base of the tree. It seemed disturbed somehow, as if something was pushing up from beneath. Driven by a morbid curiosity that overrode my fear, I knelt down and began to dig with my bare hands. The soil was unusually loose, almost eager to be moved. As I scraped away the earth, my fingers brushed against something hard and smooth. "What the hell?" I whispered, brushing away more dirt. To my horror, I realized I was holding a bone. A human bone. My first instinct was to drop it and run, but something compelled me to keep digging. With growing dread, I excavated further, uncovering more remains entangled in a web of roots. "Oh God," I choked out, scrambling backward. "It's a mass grave." The forest floor, I realized with mounting terror, was littered with human remains. Everywhere I looked, I could see bits of bone poking through the soil, intertwined with the roots of the ancient trees. "Jake? Jake, where are you?" Mike's voice called out from somewhere in the darkness. "Over here," I responded, my voice hoarse. "Mike, you need to see this." Mike emerged from the shadows, his face pale in the beam of his flashlight. "What is it? Did you find a way out?" I shook my head slowly, gesturing to the unearthed bones. "I found this." Mike's eyes widened as he took in the grisly scene. "Are those human remains?" "Yeah," I nodded grimly. "And I think they're everywhere. The whole forest. It's built on bones, Mike." As if to confirm my words, a chorus of moans rose from the surrounding trees, the branches creaking ominously above us. "We need to get out of here," Mike said, his voice trembling. "Now." But as we turned to leave, my flashlight beam caught something metallic glinting amidst the roots and bones. Ignoring Mike's protests, I reached down and pulled out an old, rusted box. "What are you doing?" Mike hissed. "Leave it." "It might have answers," I replied, fumbling with the corroded latch. "We need to know what we're dealing with." The box creaked open, revealing a leather-bound journal, its pages yellow with age. As I carefully opened it, a slip of paper fell out. A newspaper clipping so old the edges crumbled at my touch. "Local cult disappears without a trace," I read aloud, my voice barely a whisper. "Entire congregation of Arbor Vitae vanishes from secluded forest compound." Mike leaned in, his fear momentarily forgotten. "A cult? In these woods?" I nodded, flipping through the journal. According to this, they believed they could achieve immortality by binding their souls to the trees. "That's insane," Mike muttered. "It gets worse," I said, my eyes scanning the faded handwriting. "They performed sacrifices, dozens, maybe hundreds of them. They believed that by feeding the trees with blood, they could create a permanent link between the flesh and the wood." As if on cue, a drop of red liquid fell from the branches above, splattering on the open page of the journal. Mike stumbled back. "This is crazy, Jake. We need to alert the authorities. Get out of here." But I couldn't stop reading. The journal detailed the cult's final ritual, a mass sacrifice where every member offered themselves to the trees. They believed it would complete their transformation, turning the entire forest into a living, conscious entity with their souls at its core. "They did it," I whispered, the full horror of the situation dawning on me. "They really did it. The trees, the whispers, the faces. It's them. They're still here, trapped between life and death." A long, agonized moan filled the air, as if the forest itself was confirming my revelation. "So what do we do?" Mike asked, his voice small and frightened. I closed the journal, my mind racing. "I don't know, but one thing's for sure, we're not just dealing with some natural phenomenon here. This forest is alive, Mike. Really alive. And I think we've made it angry." As if to punctuate my words, the ground beneath our feet began to tremble. Roots burst from the soil, writhing like tentacles. The whispers rose to a deafening roar, filled with centuries of pain and rage. "Run!" I yelled, clutching the journal to my chest as we fled deeper into the woods. But even as we ran, I knew the truth. We were no longer in a forest. We were trapped inside a living nightmare, surrounded by the tortured souls of a long-dead cult, and they had no intention of letting us leave. The trees groaned and shifted around us, and I realized with growing dread that our discovery had only served to awaken something far worse than we could have imagined. The secrets we'd unearthed were now hunting us, determined to add our souls to their eternal wooden prison. My hands trembled as I clutched the worn journal, its pages filled with horrors beyond imagination. Mike and I had found temporary shelter in a small clearing, the trees around us swaying ominously in a wind that shouldn't exist. The whispers had quieted to a low, constant murmur, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting. "What else does it say?" Mike asked, his voice hoarse with fear and exhaustion. I swallowed hard, turning the brittle pages carefully. "It's a record of the Arbor Vitae cult's activities." God, Mike, the things they did. "Read it," he urged, eyes darting nervously to the woods around us. "We need to know what we're up against." Nodding, I began to read aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. April 15th, 1892. Today, we completed the ritual of binding for the 7th time. The screams of the sacrifice echoed through the forest, and we felt the trees pulse with new life. Elder Thomas believes we are close to achieving our goal of eternal symbiosis. Mike's face paled. Sacrifices? They were murdering people? I nodded grimly. It gets worse. Listen to this. June 3rd, 1892. A glorious day. We have successfully bound Sister Mary's soul to the great oak at the heart of our grove. Though her body has withered and died, we can hear her voice in the rustling of leaves. She is one with the forest now, the first of us to achieve true immortality. A low moan emanated from the trees around us, as if in response to the words. Mike and I exchanged terrified glances. "They really did it," I whispered. "They found a way to put people into the trees." "But how?" Mike asked, his voice cracking. "It's impossible." I flipped through more pages, scanning for answers. "Here, look at this." They developed some kind of ritual, combining old pagan rites with something they called arboreal science. They believed that by sacrificing lives to the forest, they could create a bridge between the human soul and the life force of the trees. As I read on, the full horror of the cult's legacy unfolded before us. They had spent years perfecting their technique, sacrificing dozens, perhaps hundreds of innocent victims to feed their twisted vision. Each death made the forest stronger, more aware, and brought the cult members closer to their goal of eternal life. September 12th, 1893, I read, my voice shaking. Our greatest work is nearly complete. The forest lives and breathes with the souls of our sacrifices. We can feel it calling to us, inviting us to join in its grand design. Tomorrow, we will perform the final ritual. Our physical bodies will be shed, and our spirits will become one with the eternal wood. Mike leaned in, his eyes wide. The final ritual? What happened? I turned the page, then another and another. That's it. There's nothing else written after that date. So they did it? Mike asked, his voice barely audible. They really put themselves into the trees? Before I could answer, a voice that was not quite human echoed through the clearing. Yes, we did it. We spun around, hearts pounding. At the edge of the clearing stood what appeared to be a man, but as we looked closer, we saw that his skin was bark, his hair leaves, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly green light. What are you? I managed to choke out. The figure smiled, an expression that sent chills down my spine. I am Elder Thomas, or what remains of him. We have waited so long for new souls to join us. Mike stepped back, his voice trembling. You're insane. You can't expect us to believe. Believe? The thing that was once Elder Thomas laughed, a sound like creaking branches. You've seen the truth with your own eyes. You've heard our voices, felt our power. We are the forest, and the forest is us. As he spoke, more figures emerged from the woods. Men, women, even children, all twisted amalgamations of human and tree. Their eyes glowed with the same eerie light, their bodies more plant than flesh. "You don't understand," I said, desperately trying to reason with them. "What you've done, it's not immortality. It's a perversion of nature." Elder Thomas tilted his head, leaves rustling. "Nature? We have become nature itself. We are eternal, undying. And now, you will join us." The cult members began to advance, their arms reaching out like gnarled branches. Mike and I backed away, but we could feel roots wrapping around our ankles, holding us in place. "No!" I shouted, clutching the journal to my chest. "We won't become like you." But even as I spoke, I could feel the forest's pull. The whispers had become a song, seductive and terrifying. Part of me, a part I was ashamed to acknowledge, was tempted by the promise of eternal life, of becoming one with something greater than myself. "Jake," Mike's terrified voice cut through my thoughts. "We have to get out of here. Now." His words snapped me back to reality. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from the roots and grabbed Mike's arm. "Run!" As we fled deeper into the forest, the cultists in pursuit, one chilling thought echoed in my mind. We now knew the truth behind the bleeding trees and whispered voices. But knowledge in this case might not be power. It might just be a curse drawing us deeper into the cult's twisted legacy. The forest was alive, conscious, and hungry for new souls, and we were running out of places to hide. The forest had become a labyrinth of terror, each tree a potential enemy, each shadow concealing untold horrors. Mike and I crashed through the underbrush, our lungs burning, hearts pounding a frantic rhythm against our ribs. The cultists' unearthly wails echoed behind us, growing closer with each passing moment. "Keep moving," I gasped, gripping Mike's arm as he stumbled. "We can't let them catch us." Mike's face was a mask of pure fear, his eyes wild in the dim moonlight filtering through the canopy. "Jake, I can't keep going," he panted, his legs buckling beneath him. I hauled him up, desperation lending me strength. "You have to. If we stop, we're done for." A blood-curdling shriek pierced the air, far too close for comfort. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and immediately wished I hadn't. The twisted forms of the cultists were visible through the trees, their bodies an unholy fusion of flesh and wood, eyes glowing with an otherworldly hunger. "Oh God," Mike whimpered. "They're getting closer." As if in response to his words, the very forest seemed to come alive around us. Branches reached out like grasping fingers, roots writhed beneath our feet, threatening to trip us at every step. The air grew thick with malevolent energy, the voices of the damned growing louder in our ears. "Join us," the wind seemed to whisper. "Become one with the eternal wood." I shook my head, trying to clear it of the seductive whispers. "Don't listen to them, Mike. It's a trap." We pushed on, our bodies screaming in protest, fueled only by raw terror and the primal instinct to survive. The forest grew denser, the trees pressing in closer, their bark seeming to pulse with an inner light. Suddenly, Mike cried out in pain. I turned to see a root had wrapped itself around his ankle, pulling him to the ground. "Jake, help me," he screamed, clawing at the earth as the root began to drag him backward. I lunged for him, my hands closing around his wrists. "Hold on," I yelled, pulling with all my might. But the root was strong, unnaturally so, and I could feel Mike slipping from my grasp. "Please," Mike sobbed, his eyes wide with terror. "Don't let them take me." In that moment of desperation, my hand closed around the handle of my chainsaw, still hanging from my belt. A wild idea formed in my mind. "Hang on, Mike," I shouted, revving the chainsaw to life. Its roar shattered the eerie quiet of the forest, drowning out the whispers and moans. I brought the blade down on the root holding Mike, and to my amazement, it cut through. But instead of wood chips, a spray of red liquid erupted from the severed root, splattering us both. The forest responded with a deafening shriek of pain and rage. Mike scrambled to his feet, his face pale beneath the smears of red. What? What was that?" "Our way out." I said grimly, gripping the chainsaw tightly. "Come on!" We pressed on, but now, instead of fleeing blindly, I used the chainsaw to clear our path. Each cut brought forth more of the blood-like sap, and more agonized screams from the forest around us. It felt like sacrilege, like I was cutting into living flesh, but I pushed the thought aside. Our survival was all that mattered now. "Jake," Mike gasped as we ran. "Look ahead." Through the trees I could see a faint glow, not the sickly green of the cultist's eyes, but a warm, yellow light. Hope surged through me. "It's the road. We're almost there." But the forest wasn't about to let us go so easily. The cultist's cries grew frenzied, and the trees around us began to shift and move, trying to block our path. "No," I roared, revving the chainsaw again. "You won't stop us." I cut through branch after branch, each spray of red sap feeling like a small victory. Mike was right behind me, ducking under the falling limbs, his eyes fixed on the growing light ahead. Just as we thought we might make it, a figure materialized before us. Elder Thomas, his tree-flesh body radiating fury. "You dare?" he hissed, his voice like rustling leaves. "You dare to hurt us, to reject our gift?" I raised the chainsaw, its motor growling. "Your gift is a curse," I spat, "and we're leaving now." Elder Thomas's face contorted in rage. "Then you will die," he shrieked, lunging at us with inhuman speed. In that moment, time seemed to slow. I saw Mike's terrified face, felt the weight of the chainsaw in my hands, heard the forest's fury all around us, and I made a choice. With a yell that came from the depths of my soul, I swung the chainsaw in a wide arc. It connected with Elder Thomas's midsection, tearing through his wooden flesh. He let out an unearthly scream as he fell, his body dissolving into a shower of leaves and red sap. "Run!" I shouted to Mike, and together we made a final dash for the light. We burst out of the tree line onto the road, the sudden absence of trees around us almost dizzying. Behind us, the forest wailed in defeat, the cultists' cries fading into the distance. As we stood there, gasping for breath, covered in sweat and sap, I turned to look back at the dark line of trees. For a moment I thought I saw faces in the bark, eyes glowing with malevolence and hunger. Then I blinked and they were gone. "Is it over?" Mike whispered, his voice hoarse. I gripped the chainsaw tightly, my gaze fixed on the forest. "For now," I replied. "But something tells me this isn't the end. The forest remembers, Mike, and I don't think it's going to forgive." As if in response, a soft whisper drifted out from the trees, barely audible but chilling in its clarity. "We'll be waiting." The forest had become a nightmarish maze, each turn revealing new horrors. Mike and I had been running for what felt like hours, the sounds of pursuit never far behind. Our lungs burned, our legs ached, but terror kept us moving forward. "Jake," Mike gasped, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of whispers and moans that filled the air. We can't keep this up much longer." I nodded grimly, my own breath coming in ragged pants. "I know, but we can't stop. Not here." As if in response to our desperation, the dense undergrowth suddenly gave way. We stumbled into a large clearing bathed in an eerie, silvery light. The full moon hung low in the sky, its pale face seeming to leer down at us through a gap in the canopy. "What is this place?" Mike whispered, his eyes wide as he took in our surroundings. I was about to respond when I saw it. At the center of the clearing stood an enormous tree, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Its trunk was massively thick, gnarled and twisted into shapes that seemed almost intentional. Faces, I realized with a chill. The trunk was covered in faces, frozen in expressions of agony and ecstasy. "My God," I breathed. I think this is it, Mike. The heart of the woods." Mike took a hesitant step forward, his face pale in the moonlight. "What do you mean?" I pulled out the journal we'd found earlier, flipping through its pages with trembling hands. "Listen to this. The great tree stands at the center of all, the the nexus of our power. It is through this ancient being that we shall achieve our transformation, binding our souls to the very essence of the forest. As I read the words aloud, the clearing seemed to pulse with energy. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. The faces in the trunk of the great tree began to twitch and move, their wooden lips forming silent screams. "Jake," Mike said, his voice quavering, "we need to get out of here, now." But even as he spoke, I felt a pull towards the tree. It was calling to me, promising answers, promising power. I took a step forward, my hand outstretched. "Jake, what are you doing?" Mike grabbed my arm, yanking me back. "Don't touch it." His words snapped me out of my trance. I shook my head, trying to clear it of the seductive whispers. "You're right, sorry, I don't know what came over me." Before Mike could respond, a familiar voice echoed across the clearing. "So, you found the heart of our realm." We spun around to see Elder Thomas emerging from the tree line, his wooden body creaking as he moved. Behind him, more cultists appeared, their eyes glowing with an unholy light. "You cannot escape your destiny," Elder Thomas continued, spreading his branch-like arms. "The great tree has called you here for a reason. It's time for you to join us, to become one with the eternal wood." I stepped forward, placing myself between the cultists and Mike. "We'll never join you. What you've done here, it's an abomination." Elder Thomas's face twisted into what might have been a smile. "Abomination? We have achieved immortality, become one with nature itself. Can you not feel the power that flows through this place?" And the truth was, I could feel it. The air thrummed with energy, the very ground beneath our feet seeming to pulse with life. Part of me, a part I was ashamed to acknowledge, was tempted. "Don't listen to him, Jake," Mike pleaded from behind me. "Remember what we read in the journal. This isn't life, it's a twisted half-existence." Elder Thomas's eyes narrowed. "Enough. If you will not join us willingly, then we shall take you by force. The great tree hungers for new souls." At his words, the cultists surged forward. I reached for my chainsaw, its familiar weight providing a small measure of comfort. "Stay behind me, Mike." The clearing erupted into chaos. I swung the chainsaw in wide arcs, keeping the cultists at bay. Each time the blade connected with their wooden flesh, they shrieked in pain, spraying red sap instead of blood. But for every cultist I felled, two more seemed to take its place. They pressed in from all sides, their branch-like fingers grasping at us. I could hear Mike crying out behind me, feel him pressing against my back as the circle tightened. "It's useless to resist," Elder Thomas called out over the din. "Accept your fate. Become one with us." As he spoke, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Roots burst from the earth, wrapping around my ankles. I struggled to maintain my balance and still swinging the chainsaw wildly. "Jake!" Mike's panicked voice cut through my concentration. "The tree." I turned to see the great tree's trunk splitting open, revealing a pulsing red interior. Tendrils of wood and root reached out from the opening, snaking across the ground towards us. In that moment, I knew we were out of options. We couldn't fight our way out, couldn't outrun them. There was only one choice left. "Mike!" I shouted over the roar of the chainsaw and the shrieks of the cultists. "When I say run, head for the tree." "What? Are you crazy?" he yelled back. "Trust me." I revved the chainsaw, gathering my courage. "Now, run!" We bolted towards the great tree, the cultists hot on our heels. The tendrils reached for us, but I cut through them with the chainsaw, clearing a path. As we reached the opening in the trunk, I turned to face our pursuers one last time. Elder Thomas was at the forefront, his wooden face contorted with rage. "You fool!" he roared. "You cannot destroy the heart of the woods." I met his gaze steadily. "Watch me." With that, I plunged the roaring chainsaw into the pulsing interior of the great tree. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. A deafening shriek filled the air, drowning out even the roar of the chainsaw. The entire clearing shook as if in the grip of an earthquake. "Jake!" Mike's voice barely reached me over the cacophony. "We have to go. Now!" As the great tree began to collapse around us, we ran. Behind us, the cultists' screams mixed with the dying wails of their wooden god. The forest itself seemed to be tearing itself apart, trees toppling and roots bursting from the ground. We ran until our legs gave out, until the sounds of destruction faded behind us. As we finally stopped to catch our breath, I turned to look back. In the distance, I could see a plume of dark smoke rising above the tree line. "Is it over?" Mike asked, his voice hoarse. I nodded slowly, my eyes fixed on the horizon. "I think so. We destroyed their heart, their source of power." But even as I spoke the words, a chill ran down my spine. Because in the whisper of the wind, in the rustle of leaves, I could have sworn I heard a voice, faint but unmistakable. "This is not the end. We will rise again." The heart of the woods was destroyed, but its legacy lived on. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that our ordeal was far from over. The vengeful spirits of the forest closed in around us, their ethereal forms flickering between human and tree. Mike and I stood back to back in the small clearing, the weight of my chainsaw heavy in my trembling hands. The air crackled with malevolent energy, and the whispers of the damned filled our ears. "Jake," Mike's voice quavered, "I don't think we're getting out of this one." I gripped the chainsaw tighter, my knuckles white. "Don't talk like that, we're not done yet." Elder Thomas materialized before us, his wooden face twisted into a grotesque smile. "Your determination is admirable but futile. You've seen the power of the forest, why continue to resist?" "Because what you're offering isn't life," I spat. "It's a perversion of nature." The elder's eyes flashed with anger. "Nature? We have become nature itself. We are eternal, undying. And now, you will join us in our grand design." As he spoke, the spirits surged forward. I revved the chainsaw, its roar drowning out the ghostly wails. "Stay behind me, Mike." I swung the blade in wide arcs, keeping the spirits at bay. Each time it connected with their spectral forms, they shrieked in pain, dissipating momentarily before reforming. "It's no use, Jake," Mike shouted over the din. "We can't keep this up forever." He was right, I realized with a sinking heart. For every spirit I dispelled, 2 more took its place. We were outnumbered and outmatched. That's when I saw it. The enormous, twisted tree at the edge of the clearing. Its trunk was scarred with ancient symbols, pulsing with an unholy light. Recognition dawned on me. "Mike," I yelled. "That tree, it's the source, the anchor holding the spirits here." Mike's eyes widened in understanding. "We have to destroy it." Elder Thomas's laughter echoed through the clearing. "Fool, you cannot destroy what has become one with the very essence of the forest." But I had to try. With a yell that came from the depths of my soul, I charged towards the heart tree, chainsaw roaring. "No!" Elder Thomas shrieked. The spirits redoubled their efforts, clawing at me, trying to hold me back. I felt their cold touch sapping my strength, but I pressed on. Mike was right behind me, swatting away the spirits as best he could. "Almost there," he shouted encouragingly. With one final burst of energy, I reached the heart tree. I plunged the chainsaw into its trunk, and the world exploded into chaos. A deafening shriek filled the air as blood, gushed forth in a torrent. The forest trembled, and I felt the presence of countless souls being released. "What have you done?" Elder Thomas wailed, his form beginning to flicker and fade. I didn't answer, focusing all my strength on keeping the chainsaw buried in the heart tree. The vibrations threatened to tear the tool from my grasp, but I held on, gritting my teeth against the pain. "Jake!" Mike's panicked voice cut through the cacophony. "Something's happening." I risked a glance over my shoulder. The clearing was filled with swirling ethereal forms, the trapped souls being freed from their wooden prison. But as I watched, the spirits began to coalesce, forming into a massive, terrifying shape. "Oh God," I breathed. What have we unleashed? The amalgamation of spirits towered over us, its form constantly shifting between human and tree. Countless faces appeared and disappeared within its mass, all wearing expressions of agony and rage. Elder Thomas's voice, now part of the larger entity, boomed across the clearing. You may have destroyed our anchor, but you've only made us stronger. Now we will consume you and this entire world. The spirit entity reached for us with massive branch-like arms. I yanked the chainsaw from the heart tree, stumbling back. Mike, run! I shouted. But there was nowhere to run. The entity was expanding, filling the clearing, blotting out the sky. I could feel its pull, trying to draw us in. Jake. Mike's voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I turned to see him being lifted off the ground, tendrils of spectral energy wrapping around his body. No! I lunged for him, grabbing his hand, but the pull was too strong. As Mike was drawn into the mass of spirits, his eyes met mine one last time. Find a way to stop this, Jake. Don't let our deaths be in vain. And then he was gone, absorbed into the swirling chaos. Grief and rage filled me. I revved the chainsaw one last time, facing the spirit entity. You want me? Come and get me. I charged forward, swinging the chainsaw wildly. It cut through the spectral mass, eliciting shrieks of pain, but for every part I dispersed. More formed. Your efforts are useless, the entity rumbled, Elder Thomas's voice now mixed with countless others. You cannot destroy us. We are eternal. As the chainsaw's blade connected with a particularly dense part of the entity, it suddenly sputtered and died. I stared at it in disbelief, then at the advancing wall of spirits. This was it. The end. I closed my eyes, waiting for the cold touch of the spirits to claim me. But it never came. Instead, I heard a new sound, a high-pitched whine that quickly grew in intensity. I opened my eyes to see the spirit entity writhing, its form destabilizing. No! It shrieked. What is happening? The whine reached a crescendo, and suddenly, the entity exploded in a blast of light and energy. I was thrown backward, slamming into the ground with bone-jarring force. As I lay there, dazed and gasping for breath, I saw the spirits dissipating, fading away like mist in the morning sun. The oppressive atmosphere of the forest lifted, replaced by an almost painful silence. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself to my feet. The clearing was empty now, no sign of the spirits, the heart tree, or Mike. Mike? I called out weakly, already knowing I'd receive no answer. As the first rays of dawn began to peek through the trees, I stood alone in the devastated clearing. The forest's curse seemed to be broken, but at what cost? I picked up my now useless chainsaw, my mind reeling with questions. What exactly had happened? What was that energy that destroyed the spirit entity? And most importantly, was it really over? As if in answer, a soft whisper drifted on the morning breeze. This is only the beginning. I shivered, gripping the chainsaw tighter. The battle might be over, but I had a sinking feeling that the war had just begun. Whatever I had unleashed in destroying the heart tree, whatever force had intervened at the last moment, it was clear that the legacy of this cursed forest was far from over. With heavy steps, I began the long walk out of the woods, leaving behind the scene of our final stand, and carrying with me the weight of all we had lost, and all that was yet to come. The next history. The crisp autumn air bit at my cheeks as I trudged through the Minnesota forest. Leaves crunched beneath my boots, their earthy scent mingling with the sharp tang of pine. I'd been hunting these woods for years, but today felt different. An uneasy stillness hung in the air, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Just nerves, I muttered, adjusting the rifle slung across my back. Get it together, Tom. As I pushed through a dense thicket, my eyes caught sight of something out of place. An old deer stand, its weathered wood nearly camouflaged against the trees. Curiosity piqued, I approached, running my hand along the rough planks. "Well, hello there," I whispered, a smile tugging at my lips. "You've seen better days, haven't you?" The stand creaked ominously as I tested its stability. It seemed sturdy enough despite its age. I glanced around, half expecting to see no trespassing signs, but the forest remained silent, almost expectant. "What the hell?" I shrugged. "Might as well check out the view." I began to climb, each step sending tremors through the ancient structure. The higher I ascended, the more the forest seemed to close in around me. The cheerful bird song that had accompanied my trek faded away, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed against my eardrums. Halfway up, a sudden gust of wind nearly knocked me off balance. I clung to the ladder, heart racing, as leaves swirled around me in a frenzied dance. For a moment, I could have sworn I heard a voice on the wind, a low, guttural whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "Tom, Tom, Tom." I shook my head, trying to clear the imagined sound, just the wind, I assured myself, though the words rang hollow in the oppressive quiet. Finally, I hauled myself onto the platform. The old wood groaned beneath my weight, and I found myself holding my breath, half expecting it to collapse. But it held firm, and I allowed myself a moment to catch my breath and survey my surroundings. The forest stretched out before me, a sea of red and gold leaves punctuated by the dark green of pines. In the distance, I could make out the glimmer of a lake, its surface mirror-smooth in the fading light. It was beautiful, serene, and yet something felt off. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, a primal instinct screaming danger. Slowly, I turned, my eyes scanning the tree line, and then I saw it. Perched in a nearby tree, partially obscured by shadows, was something. At first glance, it might have been mistaken for a large bird or perhaps a trick of the light. But as my eyes focused, I realized with growing horror that what I was seeing was neither animal nor human. At least not entirely. Its body was emaciated, skin stretched tight over an impossibly tall frame. Antlers sprouted from its skull, twisting towards the darkening sky like gnarled branches. But it was the eyes that froze the breath in my lungs, glowing orbs that seemed to pierce right through me, filled with an ancient, terrible hunger. Our gazes locked, and in that moment, the world around us seemed to fade away. I felt a pressure building in my head, a flood of whispers and half-formed images that threatened to overwhelm me. What are you?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The creature's mouth opened, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. When it spoke, its voice was like dry leaves scraping against bark, a sound that seemed to bypass my ears and resonate directly in my skull. "I am the hunger that never sleeps," it rasped. "I am the winter that never ends. I am the curse that binds this land." I stumbled backward, nearly falling off the platform. My hand fumbled for my rifle, but my fingers felt numb and clumsy. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. The creature tilted its head, an almost curious gesture that sent fresh waves of terror through me. "You cannot run from me, Tom," it said, my name a sibilant hiss on its lips. "You are already part of the story." With inhuman speed, it began to move, long limbs unfolding as it prepared to leap. I didn't wait to see more. Abandoning all thoughts of my rifle, I scrambled down the deer stand, my boots barely touching the rungs. Branches whipped at my face as I descended, leaving stinging welts. As my feet hit the forest floor, I heard a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my days. A howl that was part animal, part human, and wholly terrifying. It echoed through the trees, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I ran, crashing through the undergrowth, my lungs burning with each desperate breath. The sound of my panicked flight seemed obscenely loud in the unnatural quiet of the forest. Branches tore at my clothes. Roots threatened to trip me, but I pushed on, driven by pure animal fear. As I fled, one thought pounded through my mind with each frantic heartbeat. This was all horribly familiar. like a nightmare I'd had 1,000 times before, now made flesh. And as the shadows lengthened and the creature's howls grew closer, I realized with growing dread that my nightmare was only beginning. My lungs burned as I tore through the darkening forest, each gasping breath a desperate prayer for survival. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for me with grasping fingers. The creature's inhuman shriek still echoed in my ears, spurring me onward despite the growing stitch in my side. Keep moving, I wheezed, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. A branch whipped across my face, leaving a stinging welt. I stumbled, nearly losing my footing on the treacherous forest floor. As I regained my balance, a sickening crack echoed from behind me, the sound of a massive weight landing on a fallen log. It was close. Too close. Panic lent me fresh speed as I veered sharply to the left, ducking under low-hanging branches and leaping over gnarled roots. The forest blurred around me, a nightmarish obstacle course that seemed designed to trip me at every turn. "Think, Tom, think," I muttered, frantically searching for any advantage in this deadly game of cat and mouse. A memory surfaced, an old hunting technique for losing a predator's trail. Without slowing, I yanked off my jacket, letting it fall to the forest floor. The cool air bit into my skin, but I pushed the discomfort aside. Survival was all that mattered now. As I ran, I began zigzagging, doubling back on my own trail when I could. Each change of direction sent fresh jolts of pain through my overtaxed muscles, but I forced myself to continue. The sound of pursuit seemed to fade slightly, giving me a flicker of hope. That hope was short-lived. A blood-curdling howl split the air, closer than ever. The creature's frustration was palpable, its hunger a living thing that seemed to permeate the very air around me. I choked back a sob, terror threatening to overwhelm me. No, I gasped, pushing myself harder. Can't stop, can't give up. The forest opened up ahead, revealing a small clearing bathed in the last light of day. In the center stood an ancient oak, its massive trunk scarred by lightning and time. Without thinking, I made for it, my exhausted mind latching onto the faint hope of shelter. As I reached the tree, my legs finally gave out. I collapsed against the rough bark, sliding down to sit among the gnarled roots. My chest heaved as I fought to catch my breath, each inhalation a struggle against the fear that threatened to choke me. For a moment, all was quiet save for my ragged breathing and the pounding of blood in my ears. Then, a twig snapped at the edge of the clearing. I froze, eyes wide, as a figure emerged from the shadows. The creature stood upright now, its emaciated form silhouetted against the darkening sky. Those glowing eyes fixed on me, filled with an ancient, terrible hunger. "Please," I whispered, though I knew pleading would be useless. "Why are you doing this?" The creature tilted its head, an almost curious gesture that sent shivers down my spine. When it spoke, its voice was like dry leaves scraping against bark, seeming to bypass my ears and resonate directly in my skull. "You are part of the cycle now, Tom," it rasped. "The hunter becomes the hunted. The prey becomes the predator. It is the way of things." I shook my head, confusion warring with terror. "I don't understand. I've never been here before. I don't know you." A sound emerged from the creature's throat, a dry, rattling noise that might have been laughter. "Oh, but you have, Tom. Many times. In dreams, in nightmares, in lives long past. You always come back to these woods. You always climb that stand. And I always find you." As it spoke, fragments of memory flashed through my mind, dreams I'd had since childhood, nightmares of being chased through endless forests by something I could never quite see. The sense of déjà vu that had plagued me since I first laid eyes on the deer stand suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. "No," I whispered, shaking my head in denial. "That's not possible." The creature took a step forward, its movements unnaturally fluid. "Possibility is a human concept, Tom. Ideal in certainties, in hunger, in the eternal dance of predator and prey." I scrambled to my feet, using the tree for support. My legs trembled with exhaustion, but survival instinct kept me upright. "I won't be your prey," I said, trying to inject strength into my voice despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. For a moment, the creature seemed to consider my words. Then, without warning, it lunged forward with impossible speed. I dove to the side, feeling the rush of air as claws barely missed my face. Rolling to my feet, I sprinted for the tree line, no destination in mind beyond escape. Behind me, the creature's frustrated shriek split the air, a sound of primal rage that sent fresh waves of terror through me. I ran blindly, branches whipping at my face, roots threatening to trip me at every step. As I fled deeper into the darkening forest, a chilling realization settled over me. This was more than a simple hunt. It was a ritual, a cycle that had played out countless times before. And unless I could find a way to break it, it would continue to play out, over and over, until the end of time. The chase had truly begun, and with it, a desperate race against fate itself. I stumbled through the darkening forest, my legs burning with exhaustion, until I spotted a small opening in a rocky outcropping. Desperation drove me forward, and I squeezed into the narrow cave, collapsing onto the cold stone floor. My chest heaved as I fought to catch my breath, every muscle in my body screaming in protest. As night fell, an eerie quiet settled over the forest. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional gust of wind that sounded unnervingly like whispered names. I huddled deeper into the cave, fumbling for my phone with trembling hands. Come on," I muttered, willing the device to power on. The screen flickered to life, casting a pale blue glow across the rough stone walls. My fingers, numb with cold and fear, clumsily tapped out a search query. Minnesota forest creature antlers. As I scrolled through the results, a word caught my eye, sending a chill down my spine. Wendigo. "No," I whispered, shaking my head in disbelief. "That's just a legend. It can't be real." But as I delved deeper into the lore, the pieces began to fall terrifyingly into place. The emaciated form, the antlers, the insatiable hunger. It all matched what I had seen. My eyes widened as I read about the curse associated with the Wendigo, about how it was bound to the land and those who entered its domain. A twig snapped outside the cave and I froze, holding my breath. After a moment of heart-stopping silence, I heard it. A low, guttural voice carried on the wind. "Tom, I smell your fear, Tom. You cannot hide from me." I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a whimper, pressing myself against the back of the cave. The voice continued, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Do you understand yet, Tom? Do you see the role you play in this ancient dance?" Swallowing hard, I found my voice. "What do you mean? What role?" A dry, rattling laugh echoed through the trees. "The cycle, Tom. The endless cycle of hunter and hunted. You have played your part many times before, though you do not remember, and you will play it again and again, until the curse is broken." My mind reeled, trying to process this information. But why me? Why am I part of this curse? The wind picked up, and with it came the whispered names again. This time, I listened closely, and a chill ran down my spine as I recognized some of them. Names of people who had gone missing in these woods over the years. "The land remembers, Tom," the Wendigo's voice rasped. "It remembers every hunter who has walked these paths, every life taken, every drop of blood spilled. And it demands balance." I shook my head, denial warring with the growing sense of dread in my gut. "No, that's not possible. I'm just a hunter. I've never killed anyone." "Ah, but you have, Tom. In lives past, in cycles long forgotten, the land remembers even if you do not." As the creature spoke, fragmented memories flashed through my mind, dreams of other lives, other hunts, always ending in terror and blood. I gasped, overwhelmed by the flood of images. How do I break the curse?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The Wendigo's laughter echoed through the forest once more. a sound that sent shivers down my spine. That, Tom, is the question that has haunted these woods for centuries. Many have tried. All have failed. I gritted my teeth, determination pushing through the fear. There has to be a way, tell me. The answer lies within you, Tom, the creature hissed. In the memories you've buried, in the guilt you carry. Face your past, face your true self, and perhaps you will find the key to breaking the cycle. The wind died down and silence fell once more. I sat in the darkness, my mind reeling from the revelation. As I processed the Wendigo's words, I realized with growing horror that my own name might soon join the whispered chorus of the damned if I couldn't find a way to break this curse. With shaking hands, I turned back to my phone, searching desperately for more information. Hours passed as I delved deeper into Wendigo lore, each new piece of information more chilling than the last. Tales of cannibalism, of men driven to madness by hunger and isolation, of curses laid upon the land by vengeful spirits. As dawn broke, painting the forest in blood-red hues, I emerged from the cave, my eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. The weight of centuries pressed down upon me, the echoes of past lives and past failures ringing in my ears. I won't be another name on your list, I said aloud, my voice hoarse but determined. I'll find a way to end this, to break the curse, for myself, and for all those who came before me. A breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of the Wendigo's laughter. The hunt was far from over, but now I understood the true stakes. This was more than a fight for survival. It was a battle for my very soul, and for the souls of all those trapped in this endless cycle. As I set off into the forest, my mind raced with possible solutions, with half-remembered rituals and desperate plans. The legend had unfolded before me, revealing a truth more terrifying than I could have imagined. But with that truth came a glimmer of hope, a chance, however slim, to rewrite the ending of this ancient, terrible story. The whispered names of the damned echoed in my ears as I walked, a grim reminder of the fate that awaited me if I failed. But among those whispers I now heard something else, the faint, desperate pleas of souls longing for release. Their silent cries steeled my resolve. I would find a way to break this curse, or I would die trying. The next chapter of the legend was about to be written, and I was determined to make it the last dawn broke, painting the forest in eerie shades of crimson and gold. I emerged from my makeshift shelter, every muscle in my body aching from the night spent huddled against the cold stone. The beauty of the sunrise was lost on me. All I could see were potential hiding spots for the creature that hunted me. Think, Tom, I muttered to myself, running a hand through my tangled hair. You can't outrun it forever. You need a plan. My stomach growled, a painful reminder that I hadn't eaten since this nightmare began. As if in response, a nearby bush rustled, revealing a plump rabbit. For a moment, my hunter's instincts took over, and I reached for my rifle, only to remember I had lost it during my frantic flight the day before. The rabbit darted away, and a bitter laugh escaped my lips. Some hunter I am now, I said aloud, the prey instead of the predator. But the encounter sparked an idea. I may not have my rifle, but I still had my hunting skills, skills that could now become weapons of survival. With trembling hands, I began to gather materials from the forest floor, vines, fallen branches, stones. As I worked, I spoke to myself, the sound of my own voice a comfort in the oppressive silence of the woods. Okay, Tom, think like the prey for once. What would throw off a predator? I started by laying false trails, dragging a broken branch behind me to leave obvious tracks leading in multiple directions. Next, I set up simple snares and pitfalls, camouflaging them as best I could. It's not much, I admitted, surveying my handiwork, but it might buy me some time. As I worked on a more complex trap involving a counterweight and sharpened stakes, a twig snapped in the distance. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Tom. The Wendigo's raspy voice drifted through the trees. I smell your fear, Tom. Your desperation. It's intoxicating. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep working even as every instinct screamed at me to run. "Yeah?" I called out, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Well, come and get me then, if you can." A dry, rattling laugh echoed through the forest. "Brave words, little prey. But do you truly believe you can outwit a creature as old as these woods?" "Maybe not," I admitted, tightening a knot with shaking fingers. "But I'm sure as hell going to try." As I put the finishing touches on my trap, I heard movement to my left. Without thinking, I dove to the right, rolling behind a fallen log. A fraction of a second later, something heavy landed where I had been standing. I scrambled to my feet, coming face to face with the Wendigo. In the harsh light of day, it was even more terrifying, all stretched skin over impossible angles with antlers that seemed to scrape the sky. "Clever," it hissed, those glowing eyes fixed on me. But not clever enough. It lunged forward and I stumbled back, my foot catching on a root. As I fell, I heard a snap and a whoosh of air. The Wendigo's shriek of rage told me my trap had worked. The counterweight had swung down, driving the stakes into its emaciated form. But my triumph was short-lived. Even as black ichor oozed from its wounds, the creature began to pull itself free, the stakes sliding out of its body with a sickening squelch. "You cannot kill me, Tom," it growled, advancing on me once more. "I am the land itself. I am hunger incarnate." I scrambled backward, my mind racing. "Maybe not," I panted, "but I can slow you down." With that, I turned and ran, my feet finding a path I had prepared earlier, a trail that led straight to my most elaborate trap. As I ran, I could hear the creature behind me, its inhuman speed closing the distance with every second. Branches whipped at my face, roots threatened to trip me, but I pushed on, driven by pure survival instinct. "Just a little further," I gasped, seeing the clearing ahead where I had set my trap. I burst into the open space, pivoting sharply to the left at the last second. Behind me, I heard a tremendous crash and another enraged shriek from the Wendigo. Risking a glance back, I saw that it had fallen into the pit I had dug and camouflaged, its limbs tangled in the vines I had strung across the opening. "Ha!" I couldn't help but exclaim, a hysterical laugh bubbling up from my chest. "How's that for clever, you bastard?" But my victory was short-lived. Even as I watched, the creature began to tear through the vines, its claws ripping through my carefully constructed snare like it was tissue paper. "Shit," I muttered, turning to run once more. But this time, exhaustion and hunger had taken their toll. My legs felt like lead, my lungs burning with each gasping breath. I managed only a few steps before I tripped, sprawling face first onto the forest floor. As I struggled to rise, I heard the Wendigo free itself from the pit with a roar of triumph. "A valiant effort, Tom," it said, its voice closer than ever. "But futile. You cannot escape your fate." Desperation gave me strength and I managed to push myself to my knees. "My fate isn't sealed yet," I growled, grabbing a fallen branch and brandishing it like a club. The Wendigo paused, tilting its head in what almost looked like admiration. "Such spirit," it mused. "Perhaps there is hope for you yet, Tom. But the question remains, are you truly ready to face what breaking this curse will require of you?" I met its glowing gaze, my grip tightening on my makeshift weapon. "Whatever it takes," I said, surprised by the conviction in my voice. "I'll do whatever it takes to end this nightmare." A slow, terrible smile spread across the creature's face, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "We shall see, Tom," it hissed. "We shall see." As it lunged for me once more, I swung my branch with all my remaining strength. The wood connected with a sickening crunch, buying me precious seconds to scramble to my feet and run once more. This time I had no destination in mind, no clever traps waiting. All I had was the desperate will to survive, to keep moving, to find a way to break this curse before it claimed me like it had so many others. The chase continued, predator and prey locked in an ancient dance. But now, armed with knowledge and fueled by determination, I was no longer just running. I was searching for answers, for salvation, for a way to rewrite the ending of this terrible story. The forest blurred around me as I ran, my desperate plan evolving with each pounding step. Somewhere in these woods lay the key to breaking the curse, and I was determined to find it, no matter the cost. As I pushed deeper into the forest, the very air seemed to change. The vibrant autumn colors faded, giving way to muted grays and sickly browns. The trees grew more twisted, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers, seeming to grasp at me as I passed. An oppressive silence hung over everything, broken only by the crunch of dead leaves beneath my feet and my own labored breathing. "What is this place?" I whispered, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. As if in answer, a cold wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint whisper of countless voices. I strained to make out the words, but they remained just beyond comprehension, a maddening chorus of half-heard pleas and laments. I pressed on, driven by a mix of desperation and morbid curiosity. The further I went, the more signs I saw of the Wendigo's influence. Bones littered the forest floor, some animal, some disturbingly human. They seemed to form a trail, like macabre breadcrumbs, leading me deeper into the heart of this cursed land. "Oh God," I muttered, bile rising in my throat as I passed a tree adorned with skulls. "What kind of monster are you?" A dry chuckle echoed through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. The Wendigo's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Monster, Tom? Such a human concept. I am simply a force of nature, as integral to these woods as the trees themselves." I spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but saw only twisted vegetation and lengthening shadows. "You're a curse!" I shouted, anger momentarily overriding my fear. "You're nothing but a blight on this land." The laughter grew louder, tinged with a note of what almost sounded like pity. "Oh, Tom, still you fail to understand I am not the curse, I am its symptom." Before I could respond, the ground beneath my feet began to shift. Roots erupted from the earth, writhing like serpents, forcing me to stumble backward. As I watched in horror, the roots formed a crude approximation of a human figure. The Wendigo's voice emanated from this twisted effigy. "Look around you, Tom. What do you see?" Swallowing hard, I forced myself to take in my surroundings. Beyond the obvious signs of the Wendigo's presence, I began to notice other, more subtle indications that something was terribly wrong with this part of the forest. "The trees," I said slowly, realization dawning. "They're sick. Dying." "Yes," the root figure hissed. "The land itself is ill, poisoned by the greed and violence of men. My hunger is but a reflection of humanity's own insatiable appetite for destruction." As it spoke, visions flashed before my eyes. Centuries of logging, of miners tearing into the earth, of hunters taking more than their share. I saw polluted streams and razed forests, heard the echoes of gunshots and the roar of chainsaws. "No," I shook my head, trying to clear the images. We're not all like that." The root figure tilted its head, an unsettlingly human gesture. "Perhaps not, but enough of you are. Enough to wound the land so deeply that it cried out for vengeance," and I answered. I stumbled backward, my back pressing against a gnarled tree trunk. "So what, you're some kind of ecological avenger? That's insane." "Insanity is another human concept, Tom. I simply am, as I have been since the first men came to these woods with greed in their hearts and blood on their hands." As the Wendigo spoke, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A small sapling, barely visible amidst the decaying underbrush, its leaves of vibrant green that stood out starkly against the surrounding gloom. "If you're a part of nature," I said slowly, an idea forming, "then why is everything around you dead or dying? Shouldn't you be protecting the forest, not destroying it?" The root figure went still, its blank face somehow conveying surprise. "Clever boy," it hissed. "You begin to see. But seeing is not enough. The curse runs deep, Tom. It is woven into the very fabric of this land." I pushed away from the tree, standing as straight as I could despite my exhaustion. Then tell me how to break it. There has to be a way. The Wendigo's laughter echoed once more, but this time it sounded almost sad. Many have tried, Tom. Brave men and women who came before you, each thinking they could be the one to end the cycle. Their bones now nourish the very trees that reach out to ensnare you. I don't care, I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. I'll find a way. I have to. The root figure began to crumble, the Wendigo's presence fading, but its final words lingered in the air, a mix of challenge and warning. The key lies in understanding, Tom, in accepting your role in this ancient story. Are you prepared to face the truth of what you are? Of what you've done? As the last of the roots sank back into the earth, I was left alone in the twisted forest, the weight of centuries pressed down upon me, the land itself seeming to watch and wait. I looked again at the small sapling, its vibrant life a beacon of hope in this blighted landscape. Kneeling down, I gently touched one of its leaves. I'll find a way, I whispered, as much to myself as to the watching woods. I'll break this curse and heal this land, whatever it takes. As I stood, I felt a shift in the air. The oppressive atmosphere lightened just slightly, as if the forest itself was holding its breath in anticipation. I set off once more, deeper into the heart of the cursed land. With each step, I felt the weight of my mission more keenly. This was no longer just about my survival. It was about redemption. For myself, for those who came before me, and for the land itself. The path ahead was dark and fraught with danger, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of true hope. I had seen the extent of the curse, felt its grip on the land. Now it was time to find a way to break it once and for all. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly, each twisted tree indistinguishable from the last. My legs ached, my lungs burned, and despair threatened to overwhelm me. Just as I was about to collapse, I stumbled into a small clearing. In the center stood the dilapidated remains of an old trapper's cabin, its weathered logs barely holding together against the relentless assault of time and nature. Thank God, I muttered, stumbling towards the structure. Please let there be something useful inside. As I approached, a chill ran down my spine. Carved into the doorframe were strange symbols, reminiscent of Native American pictographs but twisted into grotesque, unnatural shapes. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the rusted doorknob. Come on, Tom, I said to myself. What choice do you have? With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. It creaked ominously, the sound echoing through the silent forest. The interior was dark and musty, filled with shadows that seemed to move at the corners of my vision. As my eyes adjusted, I saw the cabin was largely empty, save for a few broken pieces of furniture and a small iron wood stove. I was about to turn away in disappointment when something caught my eye. On a rickety table in the corner lay a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age but largely intact. Well, hello there, I whispered, approaching the table cautiously. What secrets do you hold? As I reached for the journal, a gust of wind blew through the cabin, causing the pages to flutter. For a moment I could have sworn I heard a voice carried on the breeze, a warning perhaps, or an encouragement. I couldn't be sure. Pushing aside my unease, I opened the journal. The handwriting was cramped and often illegible, but as I flipped through the pages, certain phrases jumped out at me. The Wendigo's curse, bound to the land, a ritual of cleansing. My heart began to race. Could this be the key I'd been searching for? A way to break the curse and end this nightmare? As I delved deeper into the journal, the writer's descent into madness became clear. The neat script of the early entries gave way to frantic scrawls and disturbing drawings, but amidst the ramblings I found what seemed to be instructions for a ritual to break the Wendigo's curse. It can't be this easy, I muttered, scanning the pages with growing excitement. There has to be a catch. As if in response to my words, a cold wind swept through the cabin, extinguishing what little light remained. In the darkness, I heard the now familiar rasp of the Wendigo's voice. "Careful, Tom. Knowledge is a dangerous thing in these woods." I spun around, clutching the journal to my chest. "Stay back," I shouted into the gloom. "I've found a way to end this, to break your hold on this land." A dry chuckle echoed through the cabin. "Have you now? And do you understand the price such knowledge demands?" I swallowed hard, thinking of the writer's deteriorating sanity evident in the later journal entries. "Whatever the cost," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "it's worth it to end this curse." The Wendigo's laughter grew louder, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Bold words, little prey. But are you prepared for the truth? For what the ritual truly requires?" I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the final pages of the journal. As I read the last entry, my blood ran cold. The final ingredient needed for the ritual was something I had dreaded to consider: a sacrifice. "No," I whispered, shaking my head in denial. "There has to be another way." "There is always a price, Tom," the Wendigo's voice hissed in my ear. "Balance must be maintained. A life for a life. Are you willing to pay it?" I slammed the journal shut, my mind reeling. "You're lying," I said, but doubt crept into my voice. "You're just trying to stop me from breaking the curse." The shadows in the cabin seemed to deepen, coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape. The Wendigo's glowing eyes pierced the darkness, fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Am I?" it asked, its voice almost gentle. "Or am I offering you the truth you've been seeking? The key to ending this nightmare, as you call it?" I clutched the journal tighter, torn between hope and horror. "But a sacrifice? That can't be the answer. It goes against everything I believe in." The Wendigo's form shifted, antlers scraping against the cabin's low ceiling. "Belief is a luxury, Tom. Here, in this place between worlds, only action has power. The question is not what you believe, but what you are willing to do." As it spoke, memories flashed through my mind. All the animals I had hunted over the years, the lives I had taken in the name of sport. Was this so different? Or was it the ultimate test of my resolve, of my determination to end this curse once and for all? I need time to think," I stammered, backing towards the cabin door. The Wendigo's laughter followed me as I stumbled out into the forest. "Time is a gift I've given you many times over, Tom. But it is running out. Choose wisely." I ran. The journal clutched to my chest like a lifeline. The glimmer of hope I had found in the cabin now felt tainted, twisted into something dark and terrible. But as the full moon rose over the cursed forest, illuminating my path, I knew I had to make a choice. The ritual offered a chance at salvation, not just for me, but for all those trapped in the Wendigo's endless cycle of hunger and death. But the price? Could I bring myself to pay it? And if I did, would I be any better than the monster I was trying to defeat? As I pushed deeper into the forest, the weight of the journal seemed to grow heavier with each step. The glimmer of hope it represented was now tinged with shadows, leaving me to grapple with an impossible choice as the night grew darker and the Wendigo's howls echoed through the trees. The full moon hung low and swollen in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the forest. I stood in a small clearing, the leather-bound journal clutched tightly in my trembling hands. Around me, I had carefully arranged the items needed for the ritual: bones gathered from the forest floor, herbs that grew in the shadow of twisted trees, and a small fire that sputtered and danced in the center of it all. "This is it," I muttered to myself, my voice hoarse from exhaustion and fear. No turning back now. As I began to chant the words inscribed in the journal, the wind picked up, carrying with it the whispered voices of countless lost souls. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches reaching towards me like gnarled fingers. Suddenly, a bone-chilling howl split the air. I stumbled over the words of the chant, my heart pounding in my chest. From the shadows of the forest, the Wendigo emerged, its emaciated form more terrifying than ever in the moonlight. "So, Tom," it rasped, circling the clearing with unnatural grace. "You've made your choice, but do you truly understand what you're doing?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet its glowing gaze. "I'm ending this," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I'm breaking the curse, once and for all." The Wendigo's laughter echoed through the trees, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "And the sacrifice? Have you come to terms with what the ritual requires?" My hands tightened on the journal. This was the moment of truth. The terrible choice I had been grappling with since discovering the ritual. The final ingredient needed was a sacrifice, a life freely given to break the cycle of death and hunger that had plagued these woods for centuries. I have," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The Wendigo's eyes narrowed, a mix of curiosity and hunger in its gaze. "And whose life will you offer, Tom? Another innocent lured into these woods? Or perhaps—" "My own," I interrupted, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess myself. "I offer myself as the sacrifice." For a moment, silence fell over the clearing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, the Wendigo threw back its head and laughed, a sound of genuine surprise and perhaps even admiration. "Brave, foolish Tom," it said, shaking its antlered head. "Always the hero, even now. But are you certain? Once the choice is made, there's no going back." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm sure. I've played my part in this cycle of violence for too long. If my life can break the curse and free this land, then so be it." The Wendigo's form seemed to flicker, as if my words had disturbed some fundamental part of its being. "You surprise me, Tom. Few have ever been willing to make such a sacrifice, but the ritual is not complete. You must finish it." With shaking hands, I returned to the journal, resuming the chant. As the words flowed from my lips, the air around us began to shimmer and twist. The fire in the center of the clearing roared to life, its flames turning an unearthly blue. The Wendigo watched, its form growing more insubstantial with each passing moment. "You've chosen well, Tom," it said, its voice now barely more than a whisper on the wind. "But remember, every ending is also a beginning." As I spoke the final words of the ritual, I felt a searing pain in my chest. I gasped, dropping to my knees as the world around me began to fade. The Wendigo's form dissolved completely, merging with the shimmering air. In that moment, as my life ebbed away, I saw visions of the forest. Not as it was now, twisted and blighted, but as it had once been, vibrant and alive. I saw the cycles of nature, the delicate balance of life and death that had been disrupted by the curse. And I saw my own role in it all, both as hunter and hunted, predator and prey. "I understand now," I whispered, as darkness crept in at the edges of my vision. It was never about good or evil, monster or man. It was about balance. As I collapsed to the forest floor, I heard the Wendigo's voice one last time, softer now, almost gentle. "Yes, Tom, you understand at last. And in understanding, you have broken the cycle. Your sacrifice will not be in vain." With my last breath, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The curse was broken, the land would heal, and the endless cycle of violence and hunger would finally come to an end. But even as my consciousness faded, I became aware of something else, a stirring deep within me, a hunger both familiar and alien. My eyes snapped open, glowing with an inner fire, and I understood the Wendigo's final words. Every ending is also a beginning. As I rose to my feet, no longer fully human but not quite the monster I had fought, I realized the truth. The curse wasn't broken. It was transformed. And so was I. The forest around me pulsed with new life, the trees straightening, the sickly pallor replaced by vibrant hues. I felt connected to it all in a way I never had before. Guardian and predator both. Balance, I said, my voice a mixture of my own and something ancient and wild. I understand now. As the new day dawned, I moved deeper into the forest. No longer Tom the Hunter, but something else entirely. The curse of the Wendigo was ended, but a new chapter in the ancient story of these woods had just begun. And as for me, I had become both the protector of this land and its most fearsome inhabitant, a living embodiment of nature's brutal, beautiful balance. The final confrontation had ended, but my true journey was only just beginning.